2, 1. We're off. Here we are on TikTok. Here we are, streaming away as we always do every single day. Well, not every single day. Monday through Thursday, Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. on the dot. We've started. Hope you guys are all doing really well out there in the world. Hope you guys are doing well out there in TikTok land, right? What a time to be alive. Frog, yeah. Sometimes I wish to be a frog, blissfully unaware of capitalism. I thought that I was going to get like a real nice night's sleep last night, but I got to tell you what, I slept real badly. And I've had kind of a grump of a day, honestly. A real grump of a day. And I thought today was going to be a nice peaceful day for me. Didn't turn out to be. So, well, we'll see how that affects the stream. We'll see how that affects everything. Right? And, man, the TikTok just like starts right away. El communist woke, and then all the Ronnie McNutt stuff. Yeah. Man, I don't even know why I glance over at TikTok, man. Very colorful, though. Very colorful. Well, very creative, right? Very creative and colorful. Hope you're doing well, Anemone. Hope you're doing well, Cotton. Damn it, man. How you doing, Cotton? I think about you all the time, Cotton. I worry about you. I've said it a couple of times now, but you're like the angry voice in my head. I hope you're doing okay out in the world, man. Like, it's getting crazier and crazier as days go by, every single day that passes. I think the thing that I really noticed about what's going on in the news cycle is a lot of news surrounding Canada sending 4 tanks to Ukraine and deploying soldiers to train, Defense Minister says. Secretary, Nova Scotia, good to see you, Nova Scotia. Canada is sending 4 combat-ready battle tanks to Ukraine and will be deploying a number of Canadian Armed Forces members to train Ukrainian soldiers on how to operate them. The Ottawa Citizen has already reported on how we like to send people over to train neo-Nazi groups over in Ukraine. So this is just a continuation of that. Defense Minister Anita Anand made the announcement on Thursday alongside Chief of Defense Staff General Wayne Eyre, vowing that in addition to the initial 4 Leopard 2 tanks, Canada may send additional tanks at a later date. Canada's delivery of the tanks will take place in the coming weeks, while the provision of trainers as well as spare parts and ammunition is pending coordination with allies, says Defense Minister. Secretary says, hippity-hoppity, abolish private property. Yeah, we should get to it. Grinning. Good to see you grinning. Swiggity-swooty. Gonna steal that booty. And of course, Russia's not being quiet about this. You've got the United States, Germany, and Canada all pledging to send equipment, tanks, to the field. Russia says tank promises show direct and growing Western involvement in Ukraine. I think one of the things that is definitely of interest for Russia in all of this is to try to penetrate through the propaganda system that has existed here in North America and across the Western world in regards to what's going on in Ukraine. And it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult. We have a very tightly controlled media system. I know that my own channel has been suspended and banned for even just reporting on non-official stuff. I feel a little uncertain and unsettled right now, even discussing what's being reported in CTV News, right? This is being reported in CTV News. This is Yahoo News. This is Reuters, right? So please don't ban me because I'm reporting on what Reuters is reporting on. Kremlin says U.S. supplied tanks will burn in Ukraine, which I actually think is the most likely situation. Like, this is very much like... The desperation of NATO is growing, right? That the Ukrainian military has more or less lost the war. The NATO forces, like honestly, it is as simple as this. And I said this last night when I was just doing my own stream, and I'll say it tonight to the TikTok people. Russia sent in 200 to 300,000 extra troops. They mobilized 200 to 300,000 men. NATO didn't do that. Send as much equipment as you like. Send as much equipment as you like. Send as many tanks as you like. The reason why they're sending this equipment over is to keep up appearances and also just funnel money into the hands of arms dealers and weapons contractors. That's the whole purpose for this. And the Kremlin said on Wednesday that any Abrams battle tanks supplied to Ukraine by the United States would burn, dismissing the expected delivery as an expensive folly. U.S. officials told Reuters on Tuesday that Washington was poised to send dozens of its M1 Abrams battle tanks to Ukraine, reversing its previous position. The report comes after Germany looked set to send its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine after initially resisting the request. Yeah, Germany sending tanks across Europe, right? There's something that we should all be celebrating. There's something that we should all be going like, oh yeah, awesome. It's super cool that Germany is sending a bunch of Leopard 2 tanks across Europe towards Russia, right? If you're Russia, you're definitely looking at that going, oh yeah, cool and normal. That's a cool and normal thing that we definitely don't have like a long, huge history with here in Russia. Right? But yeah, the last time Germany sent tanks across Europe towards us, it was completely cool, right? It was completely normal, right? Nothing bad happened to Russia. Like all this is doing is emboldening Russia's position, and frankly, emboldening the fascist and Nazi elements that exist within Ukraine. That these tanks are not going to swing the tide of battle. They're not going to swing the tide of war. They're not going to. Frankly, they're just big, gigantic targets. Like the United States, I'm sorry, Russia is dealing with like they have air superiority. They've got missile systems. They can find things and then shoot them with missiles. So the idea that these tanks are going to come in and then be the thing that really sways the battle towards Ukraine's favor, it's silliness. Like, it's just silliness. It is all just to keep up appearances and to keep winning and keep trying to win the propaganda victory. That's all. Like, that's all. And I'm very nervous talking about this, like on TikTok especially. Like, anytime you start talking about this kind of thing, like, I'll be surprised if I get more than the 10 viewers this time, just saying the word Ukraine, right? And you begin to wonder, like, how do you actually have a healthy discourse about this? Like, I always have people coming in here telling me that, like, I care, I don't support communism because I support free speech. It's like, what's this free speech you're talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, free speech, right? Like, that seems like a complete and total joke to me. Like, are we having like an open conversation about our role in the Ukrainian war? Do we genuinely think that we're having like an open conversation about the nature of what is actually happening? Like, fine, I'll accept that initially people were in like a state of hysteria and that people were in a state of like their brains were shut off and they were just like Putin bad man, right? But we're almost a year in. Like, can we actually have a genuine conversation and a legitimate conversation about how this war actually began, what actually occurred, how and actually discuss why it's continuing? Like, it seems to me like we're not actually that interested in it as a people, that we're just so frothing at the mouth for war and for death and devastation and destruction that we've just shut our brains off to it. And to the point now where, like, these tanks aren't free, you know. Like, we have serious internal troubles happening inside of our countries. We've got a homelessness crisis. We've got an opioid epidemic. We've got a housing market bubble. Like, the housing market's going out of control, even though the housing market shouldn't exist in the first place. We've got these enormous systems failures that are obviously occurring directly in front of our faces, And we're spending money on what, like soccer stadiums and tanks. Like we've lost our minds. Like we've lost our capacity to actually think in any kind of way that can be described as rational. Like and we're just not really that interested in it. Grinning says tank drivers go through almost as much training as airline pilots. It's a high skill position. No Abrams drivers will be trained in under a year. Yeah, but they don't have to be. Like, that's just it. Like, this is all they want. Like, this is all they want. They just want a tank to go out on the field so they can take a photo of it and then tell some narrative about the brave Ukrainians holding the line against the orcish hordes, right? That's really what they're doing. But the truth is that Russia has seized the territory that it claimed right? It went in with the casus belli of claiming the Donbass region, of claiming the territory that it has, seizing the territory up to the Dnipro River. It hasn't been talking about pushing out any further than that, and it's and there's absolutely no sign that it's going to lose any of that territory. It's fairly easily pushing back and repelling attacks that are coming from Ukraine and NATO, and these tanks aren't going to swing the battle, right? Like, you can't get these tanks over the Dnipro River. You can't just drive them over the river. And it's like I've been saying, I already said today, like, how are these anything except a big giant target? Well, you think there's a lot of tanks rolling around Ukraine? You think that Russia's not going to be able to do like a flyover and be like, well, gee, I wonder what all those big giant vehicles are there, right? Yeah, thank you, Seraphim. Reminder to like, share, subscribe to the channel. If you've got $1 jangling around your pocket, think about donating. If you're already donating, maybe make it $2, right? I survive off of donations generally. Yeah, and there's not enough of them to really make a difference. That's the other side of it. Like, it's not like they're sending 10,000 of them, right? Like, it's not like they're sending, like, a ton of these things. And, of course, all it really is a way the West is incentivizing Russia to hit back. This is from CaitlinJohnstone.com. Like, America's entire game, right? America's entire game is to just poke and poke and poke until the person responds. And then everybody acts like the person responding is the attacker or the assailant. When we all know that, well, I shouldn't say we all know, but people on the channel are aware that America was poking at Russia for decades. And finally, with an enormous coup in 2014, followed up by an invasion by neo-Nazis in the Donbass region, poked at Russia so devastatingly that Russia had to respond. And the truth is that Americans are largely illiterate about it. All they really know is bad man do thing. That's all they really know. And there's no like actual conversation or actual debate that actually occurs in a meaningful way throughout corporate media. And again, it's completely worth pointing out that, like, chances, I'm talking about Ukraine, I'll be surprised if I get over 10 viewers today on TikTok, because it's obvious that we live in this like Kafka-esque system where even discussing extremely basic things can get you just pushed off of these algorithms and pushed off of these channels. Like, it can even happen on accident. I watched a little clip here from the David Pakman show, and he's saying that he has lost all of his viewers. All of them. 100% of his viewership is gone because of a glitch. That what he believes is a glitch in the system that is literally not showing his videos to even his own subscribers anymore. And like this is how we're structuring this whole thing, to turn it into like worse than a Kafka-esque bureaucracy, because at least in a Kafka-esque bureaucracy there was a person involved. There was someone you were talking to. Whereas now it's just, you just get pushed off and that's the end of you. And eventually, like commentators like myself and people who do this kind of thing, like we basically need to bite the bullet and just be like, okay, well, if we're going to report on this, we just have to accept that the day that we report on these things is going to be a bad day. It's just how it's going to be. Well, Danarchist says Putin was a darling of the West until he dared to challenge Western hegemony, and I think everyone knows what I mean when I say Western hegemony. This is the rules-based order. No, I got to tell you, Danarchist, my opinion of Putin is basically like, I think that he would have been completely fine with what NATO was doing and what these things were doing if they had to just let Russia into NATO. If Russia had have been integrated into the rules-based system, which was sort of the trajectory that they were going on, that was the trajectory since Khrushchev, really. That like Stalin died, Khrushchev took over, and then from there you've got like Brezhnev and Yeltsin and Gorbachev and all of them. And it's very clear that they pivoted away from communism and were attempting to integrate themselves into the international, what's called the rules-based order. And I mean, it's hard to decry them for that outside of a vacuum of theory, because they didn't really have any allies, right? The Sino-Soviet split had already occurred. They were sort of by themselves, and I think that they saw the idea of integrating themselves into the international system, the American system, NATO, and all of this, as a way to secure safety and prosperity for their own people in the long term. But for as long as I've been studying like the Soviet Union and the history of Russia, there seems to be like a common theme that occurs in the Russian leadership, which is that they really, really underestimate how psychotic Westerners are generally. It happens pretty regularly. They really underestimate how psychotic capitalists are, and they really underestimate. They continuously attempt to interact with capitalists and with Westerners generally, with this idea of like, oh, well, they'll act this way because it's completely rational. Like, it's so rational that they'll do this. Like, this works for both of us. Like, it's good for you and it's good for me. So why shouldn't we move forward with this? And it makes total sense. And they'll even get into conversations with capitalists where the capitalists will say to their face, yeah, this is great. Let's do this. This is good. And they'll like have a handshake about it or whatever. And then the capitalists will turn around and completely backstab them. And it happens over and over and over again. And I think finally, Putin was the one who was just at the wheel when it became obvious that the West was never going to allow Russia in. Not really. They were always going to keep Russia at arm's length. They were always going to treat Russia as if they were a kind of a pariah or a sub-nation. And the goal of the West is obviously to balkanize Russia and then steal its resources, right? Like, they want to break it apart. That's what they want to do. They want to break it up. They don't want Russia to be this big giant landmass. They want Russia to be a series of provinces that they can dominate and control and play off of one another. They don't want a federated system. They don't want Russia to be independent and make its own choices for their own people. They want those resources for themselves. Like, corporate America is looking at the resources that Russia has and says those could be ours. We could privatize all of that. Like, we could go in and Raytheon could own these mines and Lockheed Martin could own this river, right? Why do the Russian people have any say in what's going on there? We should own that. And once that kind of became obvious, and it becomes obvious with the destruction of Libya, the destruction of Syria, and then the exclusion of Russia from NATO, it becomes pretty obvious. And then finally, Ukraine is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it's the place where Putin is forced to draw the line. Like, Putin doesn't have another choice, if you ask me. Like, what was he supposed to do? He's got literal neo-Nazis banging on his border. Like, what's he supposed to do? Just let it happen? Just watch it happen? While his own people tell him, what are you going to do about this? Like, I genuinely think that if it was up to Putin, he would have gladly just gone on, even with Libya, even with Syria. But Ukraine is just one step too far. Like he can't avoid it. He can't ignore it. He can't just say like, "Oh well, that's a crazy thing that happened, but let's move on." Like it's an existential threat to his own nation. And it's made it obvious that the goal of the United States in all of this is to destroy Russia. Like it's obviously what they're trying to do. And I really think that to pretend like something else is going on is sort of a weird position. Like just kind of like an odd, creepy, kind of like pro-imperialist, like how could you even deny it? It seems so obvious. But to even bring it up is to put yourself in danger, right? You can get your channels scrubbed, you can get removed from the internet, you can get all this kind of stuff, right? So eventually there just comes a point where you have to make the decision, well, are you going to do it or not? We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I've been listening to Russian Soviet so-called propaganda since, or what people might call news, right, since 1967 or so. They usually sounded reasonable. Well, because to me the big difference is like the Russians don't really have this big history of committing genocide, and they don't really have the idea of like a manifest destiny, right? They don't have like this major white supremacist ethos built into the core of who they are as a people, right? Like the more you understand that Americans are driven by the idea of manifest destiny, the crazier it gets. And it does just get crazier. That this is all ours and we can have it because God said so. And it's in the ethos. It's in the way they think. And the Russians just don't have that. It's just not the same for them. That they view what they have as the Eastern Orthodox aspect of the society says that gives them the sense that they are stewards of the land, but the land is ultimately God's. Like that's more what's built into their ethos. The idea that we don't own this, we're just in charge of it. And there are difficulties that come along with that, but nothing that even approaches the difficulties that exist in the American ethos of we own this. God said we own this and it's ours and we're going to have it, right? Whereas the Russian perspective is more like, no, we don't own it. We're just managing it, right? So we're like the managers of God at the moment. But they kind of did. They expanded across Siberia, though. I mean, expanded across Siberia. Like they took, the tundra area? Hey, Sigma, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. So, to me, this Ukraine situation and the Ukraine war, this situation that exists, it's for, like, you can see it with the shipping of these tanks over. It's literally just the West taxing the world, taxing its own citizens, and funneling weapons and funneling that money into the hands of weapons contractors who have to produce something and put it on the field, right? So like Ukraine really is this like just a place to spend money. It's just a business opportunity for these people. Like that's really all it is. For the Russians, it's this major existential threat that can actually destroy them. And they know it, and that's why when there are calls for mobilization, people actually show up, right? Whereas, can you imagine if the United States or NATO tried to mobilize like even 10,000 people? Like if they tried to mobilize like 100,000, 200,000 people, it wouldn't happen, and they know it wouldn't happen. Like the burger eaters in America are happy with complaining about subjects they know nothing about, but they're never going to actually get off the couch and go overseas and fight a war over it, right? They're not actually going to do that. Like, we got a lot of couch warriors over here in the West, and but we're not actually going to get up and do anything about it. Speaking of doing stuff about it, there is a protest planned, Queen's Park, February 25th. That's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Queen's Park, February 25th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Oh man, I've been telling people it's February 21st. My mistake. So if I've been saying that, I need to correct that. February 25th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Welcome back, party. It's when the government comes back into session here in Ontario, and hopefully a bunch of people show up for it, because this is getting to be a bit ridiculous, if you ask me. Like, what's happening in Ontario is beyond the pale. Like, Sigma, you're asking how I'm doing. I'm doing badly, man. I'm doing badly. Like, I'm living in a province that's literally eating itself, and for no reason, whatsoever. Unless you really think that it's beneficial to empower a small group of psychopaths, right? If you really think that empowering a small group of psychopaths is important, then great. You're living in the golden age right now. But if you actually think that maybe not, like maybe letting the guys who went to Jeffrey Epstein's island have all the power is a bad idea, then this is truly a dark age that we live in. Yeah, I hope things get better too, dude. I hope things get better fast, because we are in a significant and major decline in the West. Like, it's a significant one, and it's one that there is no leader in any position anywhere that is actually attempting to resolve the issues that people like Pierre Poilievre are happy to bring up, the fact that we're in a decline, but it's only to say, oh, it's all the liberals' fault, right? And to funnel a lot of the right-wing anger that has been coming out because of the obvious, overt, and total abandonment of the populace of Canada that only the dullest rube would ignore, to funnel that energy away from protests and away from revolutionary action into just the dead electoral system that is happy to prop these things up. Like, if someone like Pierre Poilievre gets into power, it's privatization across the board. Like, you think that the privatization that Doug Ford is bringing in is bad? Just wait. Just wait until the federal government is owned by these guys. Then you're going to see something that is going to be rapid. It's going to be a rapid decline. And the idea that they're going to do anything to actually attempt to prop up the needs of the populace, like, homelessness is going up. The opioid epidemic is spreading, and the worst part about the opioid epidemic, if you ask me, is how easy it is to convince people that that's an individualist issue, when it's obvious that, like, organizations like the CIA and the DEA are flooding the market with drugs. Like, this is what happened during the 100 years of humiliation in China. That imperialist powers flooded China with drugs and opium, right? So that depressed, impoverished people could get like a little spike of something resembling joy in their life for half a second, right? And this is the capitalist solution to poverty, right? Oh, you're desperate and crushed and depressed. Well, here's some drugs, right? And if we can't convince you to do it the legal way, right? Like if which is to get a prescription, then you can go to the streets and get some. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, all the rest. How you guys all doing out there in TikTok land? Wow, miracle of miracles, 80 viewers. That is a miracle. Hope you guys are all doing well out there in TikTok land. Be sure to hit that like button. I got 83 viewers, only 77 likes. Come on, TikTok. Come on. You can do better. I believe in you. I believe in you. Yeah, individualists, you're addicted because you're not giga-chat enough to resist drug use, even though it's flooding the market and it's everywhere. Like, even though the CIA and the DEA are just flooding the market with it, like, it's obvious. It's obviously it's obviously your fault completely, right? How dare you attempt to find a little bit of happiness for even a second? Mocked, good to see you, Mocked. Santora, absolute pleasure to see you as well. And just to let everybody know on TikTok, right? Yeah, every time I glance over to the chat, right? Name one time communism has worked in a country. Literally, China exists, bro. And if you want to have a serious conversation about it, you can come over to YouTube, right? Like, I don't really talk to the TikTok stream because it's just a stream of absolute craziness, right? Just absolute nuttiness. Yeah. Skippy is fine with the abandonment. Of course he is. No, of course he is. Like, he's completely fine with the abandonment because it doesn't matter to him. Like, Pierre Poilievre is a landlord who has never worked a day in his life. He doesn't actually care about the needs of the working class. He's gotten really good at propagandizing the working class and adopting working class language. But this is what fascists always have done since the very beginning, is to co-opt left-wing language and left-wing rhetoric, right, in order to gain sympathy from the public. And then when they gain power, they absolutely betray them completely. And it's no different for these conservatives. And the conservatives are making it obvious. Like, this is the part that makes it really really embarrassing. Like, as a citizen, I'm, like, embarrassed to be a Canadian because it's obvious now. Like, I don't know how they could make it more obvious. Like, do these guys actually have to go around with guns and just, like, kill people in the streets? Do they actually have to go up to homeless people and just, like, physically put a gun against their head and shoot them? And even then, I think we're so pathetic as a people that we would just be like, what? I can't. And then we would forget about it because Will Smith will slap Chris Rock or something, right? And there's no political force in Canada that's even attempting to stand up and say, like, the best we get are these NDP being like, oh yeah, we'll raise taxes on the rich by 0.3% and that'll fix it. Like, no, it won't. Like, it just won't. Like, as long as they have control of the means of production, as long as we allow them to have any decision-making capacity in what happens in the world, they're always going to funnel their riches into Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Like, it's who these people are. And they're not going to stop it. Yeah, Giga Chads use drugs safely and appropriately. Only betas are 100% sober. I love this tweet. Wild how smoothly we transitioned from no one wants to work to record layoffs, right? Isn't that interesting how that worked? No one wants to work. Oh, by the way, we're laying 10,000 people off, but no one wants to work. Like, the capitalist simps are just at this stage in the game, the capitalist simps are just brain dead, like, mouth breathers. Like, just drooling from their mouth. Like, they don't have anything interesting to say. They don't have anything interesting to contribute. And yet they're taking up all the oxygen in the room. And if you stand up and actually say, this is a pretty obvious solution to the problem, then it's a problem because it doesn't work for the capitalist simps. Like, take the housing market. The housing market is one of these things where, like, it should be obvious to everyone that there's a problem. Like, if you're standing up and saying that what's happening in the housing market is fine, you're a Nazi, and the conversation's over. So most people, including conservatives, including people like Pierre Poilievre, are standing up and saying, yep, problem in the housing market. But the issue is that all of their solutions are, well, we got to make sure that the investment is secured. We got to make sure that investors are protected. And I'm standing here being like, no, we don't. Like, we don't at all. There doesn't need to be a housing market. We should not have a housing market. Such a ridiculous idea should be completely abolished from the way that we think. And it should be so ingrained in our mind that there should not be a housing market, that if somebody stood up and said we should have a housing market, they should be banished from the civil society. Like, we should ridicule those people so ruthlessly that they are too shamed to even stand up and say these insipid things. There should not be a housing market. And the people who are trying to prop it up should have their investments stripped and should be told to shut the fuck up. And it really, really should be that simple. It should be that straightforward. But We're too stupid and gullible, frankly. Like it's just the truth. Like we think that capitalism is great, and even though it's obviously betraying us and completely collapsing underneath our feet, but yeah, we just got to do minor reform. That's gonna do it. Eric, John, this is why I argue a conservative is worse than a liberal. Liberal's job is to stabilize the mess the conservative create, but it's always the conservative who creates the mess. But you know what, man? Like they're partners. Like there's no they operate slightly differently. Like they have slightly different objectives, but not by a lot and not by enough. Like they're buddies, they're partners. Like one's the good cop, one's the bad cop, right? Like, but they're both partners. So to try to pretend like, oh, liberals are better than conservatives. No, they're not. Like they're not. The only real difference that I've ever come to see between a liberal and a conservative is that the liberal will at least tilt his head and go, "Oh, that's so bad for you." But they're both voting for the system of betrayal. They're both voting and working to ensure that the society collapses underneath our feet. Like they're both funneling money offshore and into Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, right? The question is whether or not they're going to do it while going, "Oh no," or not. That's all. That's the only difference I can perceive. Like, especially these Trudeau liberals. Like, I don't see any difference between these Trudeau liberals and like the Harper conservatives. And in many ways, the Harper conservatives were better than the Trudeau liberals. So I don't understand this whole argument. Pay, how you doing, bud? Pay Sages. Employers are now suing remote workers for time theft. And what's so hilarious about that is wage theft is the #1 form of theft. Like, and it's not close. Like if you take, like, if you look at the primary forms of theft in the society, the primary forms of theft in the society are wage theft by a large margin. The next is like burglary, and it's like a little tiny sliver. So whenever these conservatives and liberals stand up and start complaining about crime in the society, right? It's compare it to the literal theft of wages from corporate America. It's not even close. Like, it's not even remotely close. And so again, a gullible populace is just kept focusing on the stupid things that barely matter, because corporations are free to steal as much as they want. But if you get like a half hour of time, like if you just get like a little sliver of extra time, that, oh no, it's a big crisis. It's the exact same thinking that, like, when the CERB went out, or when America distributed checks to people during the COVID period, right? And then there was this whole tizzy about, like, oh, we misattributed some of this to some of the working class, and oh, some people got an extra $500 and all, and it was like this huge, massive. It's like I'm like, who cares? Like, who gives a fuck at all? It's like the most irrelevant shit of life. And yet we're supposed to take it seriously while we're literally watching people like Galen Weston steal from us every single day. Like, that's what this inflation all is. Like, inflation isn't just like a natural phenomenon force that's sweeping through the nation. It's the wealthy class going, oh, we can just charge more. Great. Like, why do you think corporate profits are up? Like, what do you think that is? And we're just so stupid standing around saying, oh, I guess they do have to, the natural forces that exist, and we're so gulled that we actually believe them when they say this stuff, when all they're doing is going, oh, hey, they've got to buy from us, why don't we just charge more? And they are. And what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? How to make yourself completely irrelevant right away, bud. I can't believe people take the time to come in here just to say a childish insult, as if it matters to me. Like, geez Louise. And it's especially funny when it's on my weight, because it's like, I could lose like a couple. My thing is that I need to get better in the shoulders. I need to get more broad in the shoulders. I'm working out on that, and I'm trying to improve that. But to come in and just be like, why are you so fat? It's like a baby. It just convinces me that you're a baby, and that's all it is. Like, oh no, there's a baby who said something. Have you heard what's taken place with Steven Crowder in the Daily Wire and what Candace Owens said to him? Yeah, I think that's all performative. They're all just trying to get more money. That's it. Like it's just all performative action. They're all just jockeying for position, right? Like they're all just trying to get a better deal, do a better hustle, right? That's all. And what's interesting about all of that, if you ask me, like Steven Crowder and the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro, and then Candace Owens. Candace Owens saying that Steven Crowder's a socialist and all this kind of stuff. Like they all know what they're doing. Like they all understand that they're just jockeying for position in the social space to try to get a better number, to get a better deal. And what's because they're all grifters, right? And they're all unabashed, open, lying grifters. They don't believe anything. They have no moral center or moral core. They genuinely just want money for themselves. And because of that, and they all understand that of one another, so because of that, they all respect the game that they're all playing with one another. That, oh yeah, we're just doing this. We're just trying to, we're taking out the daggers and stabbing at each other right now. That's fine, right? And that'll mean more money for you or less money here, or this kind of stuff. And like, that's it. They understand that what they're doing is playing a game. And how do we know they understand that? Because they openly tell us, right? They openly tell us that they think that this is a game. And so they're just playing the game. That's all they're doing, right? Like there isn't much of a like the Daily Wire wants to and again, like, yeah, of course the Daily Wire wants to buy up kind of like that's classic conservatism, right? Or classic capitalism, right? Just this increasing monopolization more and more of media spaces. And so yeah, of course they want to buy this thing. What's amazing is the 50 million price tag, if you ask me. Like I don't think Steven Crowder's worth 50 million. Like that's outrageous. And it just goes to show you how dumb Steven Crowder is, because or not dumb but greedy Steven Crowder is. Because if I'm Crowder, I'm like 50 million done, like we're finished, right? But the grifters are always like, how much more can I get? And that's all the conversation's about. Yeah, capitalism is just one huge pyramid scheme, and the middle class is fighting to keep their place in the pyramid hierarchy. Yeah, and they won't be able to. I love this. I found a meme. I can't display it in the way that I do before, but it's that scene from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? Which is the implication scene. Think about it. They've got a kid to feed, rent to make. They have no capital. Oh, I have nothing to sell but my labor. What am I going to do? Say no? Okay, that seems really dark, though. No, it's not dark. You're misunderstanding me, bro. Yeah, I think I am. Yeah, you are, because if the worker said no, then the answer is obviously no. The thing is that they're not going to say no. They'd never say no because of the implication. I love this. It fits so perfectly, right? That the implication of homelessness and starvation, right? That we all know that we would experience if we said no to these capitalist psychopaths. That's the whole thing. Yep, and the reason she called him a socialist was because he was trying to negotiate his contract, and her replied, but what is Amazon worker? Honestly, like Candace Owen getting involved, she just wants the story to be about her. That's all. Because that increases her profile. Like, that's it. Like, Candace Owens is an unabashed grifter. Like, she has, like, I actually think that Shapiro does have, like, a moral core. It's just rotten. It's just a rotten core. And Crowder, I think, actually does believe in something. Like he I think that he thinks that there is some. Candace Owens has none of that. Candace Owens is straight up just a mercenary for hire. She's 100% an opportunist. And if there's a story going on, she's going to try to get into the middle of it. That's her whole shtick. Yeah, around 80% of the stimulus... Good to see you, Matthias. About 80% of the stimulus money in Canada went to the top 20% income earners. Absolutely. Like, the idea that, like, oh no, we should worry about the $200, $300 that someone got, like... it was an overt, obvious transfer of wealth that occurred right in front of our face. And we're all supposed to just act as though it didn't happen. Like... Yeah, but it's okay for the ownership class to take 3-hour lunches. Yeah. Jastin Debunsky. Yeah, good to see you here, bud. I hope you're here to be beautiful, bud. I mean, dude, look at mainstream right libertarian talking points. They're all fashy left leaning talking points that lead to corporate religion, an excuse for corporate towns to take place. Yeah. ANCAPs equal feudalism under another name, specifically corporate towns running militias in Rust Belt like areas. Yeah. That's the future of all of this. Like, that's where this is all going. Like, because. Uh, uh, because there is no unifying project, and because there's like literally no organization that is even attempting to seriously confront the issues that are in front of them. Like, you can see it with like the World Economic Forum. Anytime these guys get together, the thing that like there's this, the World Economic Forum to me is hilarious because there's the general sense, the general tone that exists out in the public of the World Economic Forum is like sinister music, the wealthy and the rich getting together and plotting the demise of boom, 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 boom. There's a conspiracy going on, everybody, and they're fighting against the American people, and we gotta all get together and fight against them, right? It's like that Alex Jones like sinister kind of thing going on. Whereas my position on the World Economic Forum is like, yeah, of course the rich and the powerful are going to get together to have discussions like that. Of course they're going to do that. And near as I can tell, these guys are clowns. Like literally like dun 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 dun. Like when they stand up and talk, anytime I see a clip of somebody talking at the World Economic Forum, there's always like boom. There's always like a sinister like dun 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 kind of undertone going on underneath it. And I always just eliminate that sinister undertone in my mind and just replace it with dum 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 dum, and it makes way more sense. These people are detached, moronic, idiotic clowns. They have no idea what they're doing. They're extremely stupid, right? And like the way that some of these people are obviously psychopaths. But their plans would never work. You'd never actually get like implants implanted into the like look at what the populace did when you said put a cloth over your face. Well, now you're going to stand up and say let's put a robot chip in your brain? Like, it's never going to fucking work. You're never going to actually do it, and to think otherwise is stupid. Like, you're a dummy if you think otherwise. And that's what all of these fucking guys are. They're just dumb, moronic, clown-shoed idiots, and they're starting to realize it. I think is the big thing. Like, they're starting to put it together. Like, they get together and they're starting to look at one another, being like, maybe we're stupid. Like, because they fucking are. They're the dumbest people in the room. They literally cannot figure out. Take a person, put them in a house, homelessness over. They literally cannot figure this out. And so the idea, like, we should be paying attention to what they say, but only insofar as we should go, oh my god, these fucking idiots. Like, these clueless rubes. Yeah, U.S. prisoners got stimmy checks and people bitch despite the money caused prison violence to die down drastically. Yeah, I mean, like... Dude, if you want to talk to me, like, I'm not going to accept your debate bro invite, right? Come over to YouTube. We'll see if you're literate. Like, I'm not going to... I love the debate bro shit, dude. Let's take somebody who doesn't know anything about the subject and put them against somebody who actually does know something about the subject and see what happens. I recently watched a documentary on the WEF where it talked about its origin. The origin started decades ago, and essentially there are liberals who are trying to discuss on how to humane capitalism. Yeah. Like, humane capitalism, as if such a thing are possible, right? Like the issue is the structure. And I think that that's something important for us to kind of keep talking about, is that it isn't that the people need to be replaced. That's essentially what electoral politics argues, that it's the people that need to be replaced, right? Whereas that's not the case. That's not the argument. If you replaced the people with another group of people, they're going to act the same way because the structures are the same. That what you need to do is get rid of these structures and do different structures. Jaston asks, thoughts on Vosh? Vosh is a FBI informant. He's confessed to it on his stream. He's kind of a creepy pedophile weirdo, just like a lot of these guys are. Like, you got Justin Roiland coming out now, who's a creepy pedophile weirdo. You got the Jeffrey Epstein thing. So, seems as though the closer you get to power, the more embedded, the more pedophilic you become. I think there's like a threshold, right? I think that once you hit like $10 million, you become a pedophile. I think that that's what happens. And I mean, it's so. And if you don't care about the pedophile stuff, or if you think that, oh, that's a bit outlandish or whatever, he's just outright confessed to being an FBI informant. Like, this is the guy that you're gonna go listen to about, like, well, you think he's gonna have a big anti-imperialist take? You think he's gonna try to convince you? You think he's gonna actually take anti-capitalist talking points seriously when the guy's working for the FBI? Like, nah, brah. Like, straight up, nah. Like, he should be abandoned as a serious commentator, and the fact that he hasn't been gives you a general sense of the intellect level of the average American. I mean, libertarian socialism is a contradiction in terms. Like, it's like, I mean, libertarian is such a loaded word because it means different things to everybody, right? Like, what are you talking about? The libertarianism of Europe, or are you talking about the libertarianism of the Deep South? Are you talking about the libertarianism of corporations? Like, like, everybody's just taken this word libertarianism and it basically seems to mean what you want it to mean. So when you say libertarian socialism, I literally don't know what you're talking about. And then, like, you're also saying at the same time worker co-ops and anarcho-syndicalism. Like, there's a lot of different ideas. There's a lot of different concepts going on in that statement, so I don't know how to comment on it. Like, do I think... So, what do I think about libertarianism? Depends what you mean. Worker co-ops I'm hugely in favor of, because they strip power away from the psychopath class. Anarcho-syndicalism seems to me to just basically be, let's be ruled by corporate power, like feudalism, essentially. And then socialism. I'm not really set up for that, Jazz. I don't really care to do that in the live stream, honestly. Like, it's I prefer to do it this way, because honestly, like, I don't really know who you are. I get a lot of fascists here. Like, I get a lot of fascists here. This is a pretty, and I just don't care to do it. Like, I understand why you want to do it, but it's not really a win from my perspective. Yeah, Vosh is further to the right on Biden on some issues. I mean, but look, Vosh exists to take revolutionary energy and funnel it back into the dead system of electoral politics. That's what it's for. Like, that's what he is. That's what he does. And, like, I actually have big question marks over I got big question marks over somebody even like Hassan for this, right? Like, what's Hassan actually doing? Like, I like Hassan a lot. I don't think he's working directly with the CIA or the FBI. I think he's his own guy. I just think he cares about his business more than he cares about any kind of movement. And, like, he seems to just be funneling energy back into the Democratic Party. So, yeah, Ligon Disease says, a sexual harasser, too. Harassed an autistic woman who was a rape victim beforehand. Yeah, let loose his fans on her. Yeah, like, honestly, like, if you want to... Vosh is a creepy weirdo. Like, that's my, like, sticking, like, boom. That's where I land with this guy. He's just a creepy weirdo. Yeah, but this is what I'm trying to say, Eric, right? Is that libertarian seems to just mean whatever you want, right? Like, it just means whatever you want. And so I don't think it's very useful. Like, when I hear libertarian, I think PPC. Like, I think far right, like, libertarians. Like, that's what I think. But then I get a bunch of leftists in here being like, actually, I'm a libertarian anarchist, or I'm a libertarian socialist. Or I'm just like, it's just meaningless. I don't know why anyone on the left would ever use this word. It's so just dripping with like you have literal like far right fascist adjacent groups that are like, I'm a libertarian. And then you've got people on the far left being like, I am also a libertarian. Like, what am I supposed to say to this? And I just am like always trying, like, libertarians are non-authoritarian leftists unless they're MAGA hat wearers. Like, yeah, but I don't think that they're trying to pervert the term. I think they have successfully perverted the term. I think it just means whatever the person who's saying that's what it is. And then what do you end up doing? You end up doing what we're doing now, which is spending all your time clarifying the term. Like, and I don't know what you really get out of it. Like, what's the W? Like, how do you win with that? Because it seems as though the proponents of libertarianism itself don't actually have, there's no like consensus. It's not like communism. Like, there's a pretty strong consensus view on what like the foundation of communism actually is. But like, what's the actual foundation? What's the actual foundation of libertarianism? Justin said, I get what you mean by having a problem with fascists. One weird comment, you can boot me. I just fucking hate typing. You know what, Justin? You come back on Monday, okay? I don't want to do it tonight. Come back on Monday. Well, I do got to get this set up so it's a little cleaner, so it's a little easier to do. I just don't want to. Honestly, I just don't want to. Well, if you want to fight for the intellectual space of libertarianism, you've got to tell me what it is at its most basic terms, like on the ground. Like, that's like, because I could tell you, like, what is communism on the ground? It's the idea that there is two classes, an ownership class and an owner class, that are constantly in a state of antagonism with one another, and it's the idea that we should eliminate that. Like, that's it. That's the foundation of it. And I've never seen anybody articulate the foundation of libertarianism in a way that's coherent or makes sense, and it always seems like it's constantly different. So I just don't like what is it even? Because it seems like it's different to everybody. And when people on the far right describe it, they're basically saying we should be feudal peasants under a corporate oligarchy. And when leftists talk about it, they tend to talk about it in very like horizontal organization, no power structure over it all. And so I just am like, it eventually becomes one but this is the thing, Grinning, like, just why are you, if libertarianism is anarchism and they are synonymous terms, then just call it anarchism. Like, I don't understand it. I don't really get this. Like, I don't really understand why we're like having this conversation at all then. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really get why we're having this conversation at all. And it just, and we could talk about anarchism. Like, really my only difficulty with anarchism is that I just don't think it works when you've got an American imperialist state trying to destroy you. Right? That if you had your principles, right? If you had your anarchist principles and you were organized along horizontal lines, the very first thing that would actually happen is you get completely rolled over, right? Like, the Americans aren't just going to let you live. They're not just going to let you exist. They're not just going to look at your anarchist communes and be like, oh yeah, that's fine, right? Nah, that's not how it's going to go. Not even remotely close. Anyway, this is all a bit inside baseball, frankly. Like, I don't... Here's an article written by our friends over at Socialist Action, right? Ford's healthcare privatization, a slippery highway to hell. This is by Daniel Tarade, who I've had on the podcast before. Well, folks, he's done it again. Ontario Premier Doug Ford retrieved the major tool in his toolbox, privatization. This time, Ford brandishes privatization to hammer on the nail that is the province's healthcare system. As reported by the CBC last week, Ford and Healthcare Minister Sylvia Jones are planning to make an announcement next week on expanding the number and range of surgeries performed in independent health facilities outside of hospitals. Independent health facilities are generally for-profit clinics operated by private owners. Ontario's Conservative government first proposes to expand the number of cataract surgeries performed at independent facilities, followed by other non-urgent, low-risk, and minimally invasive procedures. By 2024, private clinics will be allowed to even perform hip and knee replacement surgeries. The expansion of private healthcare represents a dangerous attack on socialized medicine and the tenet that everyone deserves access to quality healthcare independent of their ability to pay for it. While Ford argues that individuals will be able to access private clinics without paying out of pocket, the government promises to pay these costs just as it pays for publicly owned clinics. Healthcare advocates make clear that this move further erodes public health care. One danger with a mixed public-private healthcare system is that for-profit clinics focus almost entirely on lighter care profitable patients. Those who need complex care will have to rely on publicly owned healthcare institutions, who cannot turn away less profitable patients and will suffer the most under our under-resourced, overburdened system. Remember, Ford's government will be giving millions directly to for-profit clinics, which is money that otherwise would go to our public system. As more money is put into private clinics, the most vulnerable among us who cannot access private clinics will be left with an even more underfunded public system. Another massive issue for for-profit clinics is that in addition to siphoning money away from our public system, they also siphon away staff. Investment into private clinics leads to greater understaffing in our public institutions, as both private and public sector seeks to hire the same workers. We see this at play with our mixed public-private mental health care system. A resident in Ontario can see a psychiatrist, psychologist, or social worker for free if they are offered in government-funded hospitals, clinics, or agencies. But with a lack of funds for public mental health care, most practitioners operate in the for-profit sphere, where they can pick and choose the most stable, least complex, and wealthiest clients, while the rest of us are left waiting months for access to public services. The same reality awaits all of us if we continue to expand private healthcare. We must contend with the obvious contradiction in for-profit healthcare. A for-profit corporation prioritizes profit accumulation above all, whether providing healthcare or selling luxury watches. Every for-profit corporation treats their business as a profit-generating machine. While the masses of workers and oppressed people generally agree that ill people should not be gouged by greedy corporations, the Ford government clearly condones gouging. A December 2021 report from the Office of the Auditor General of Ontario found that the Ministry of Health has no oversight mechanism to prevent patients from being charged inappropriately for publicly funded surgeries. The Auditor General found that for-profit clinics misinformed patients of their rights to receive standard cataract surgery and extra charges. For a private clinic, upselling of medically unnecessary procedures and services represents another avenue to bolster the bottom line. Profit in their pocket. Anything beyond profit is secondary, which constitutes a violation of the basic oath each doctor takes to first do no harm. All procedures come with some risk, and if a procedure is not necessarily outside of its ability to generate profit for a corporation, then this upselling is clearly at odds with the basic principle of medical practice. In Ontario, we see many examples that prove profit matters more than for-profit healthcare providers than the health and even life of their patients. The Ontario Science Table released a report January 2021 showing that for-profit long-term care homes had COVID-19 outbreaks with nearly twice as many residents infected and 78% more resident deaths compared with nonprofit long-term care homes. Both for-profit and publicly owned nonprofit long-term care homes charge residents with some fees and receive the same financial support from the government. So why do for-profit homes see their residents die at a higher rate, especially during COVID-19? To maximize profits, they cut costs. For example, even though Ontario provides a fixed per diem of $103.88 per resident for nursing and personal care to both for-profit and publicly owned non-profit long-term care homes, for-profit corporations pay their healthcare workers less and hire disproportionately more casual and part-time staff to avoid paying benefits. This results in residents at for-profit long-term care homes receiving fewer hours of daily care than those at non-profit long-term care homes. As the Ontario Health Coalition notes, for-profit facilities have fewer services and provide lower comfort and security, which increases resident stress levels. Despite equal public funding for both for-profit and non-profit long-term care homes, the former takes some of that cash and puts it into their pockets, while the latter puts everything towards care for residents. Let's be clear, healthcare is a fundamental human right. Any move to restrict access to healthcare on the basis of individual wealth is exclusionary and a form of class warfare. Privatization of healthcare only serves to further widen the societal gap between the capitalists and the lower class. It disproportionately harms the most vulnerable among us. The Ontario government should not look to profitability as a motivator for funding public services. There are critical supports an individual needs to participate in a happy, healthy society. Healthcare is a primary one. If Ford is truly interested in ameliorating the province's health crisis, then the funds he's willing to invest in private for-profit clinics should go towards supporting public health care workers who are already struggling rather than letting them drown. We need to properly invest in our public health care system. Not only will funding our public health care system cost less than subsidizing for-profit care, it will also result in better care and healthier communities. Thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate you writing that article, mate. Really good one. And what's my chat talking about here? Content, cutting through it all. Man, I just want a proletarian police state. There you go. Yeah. I just want to live in a society that's even attempting to solve its problems. Anarchism can work at least militaristically using guerrilla warfare with cells of fighters, much like how Vietnamese or Al-Qaeda defended against U.S. military. I mean, yeah, those sorts of entrenched, like, guerrilla warfare tactics and all of that, like, it's slightly different because it's not on your home territory. Like, it's slightly different. But I understand what you're saying in terms of the military engagement. Like, the American military strategy is usually just shock and awe and overwhelming force. That's really all it is most of the time. That they don't really use, like, very clever strategies. Like, they really are just like, we've got big bombs and we're coming in and just going to do big bombs. So the way to fight that is through small scale skirmish warfare. And just never let them find you. Because it doesn't matter if they've got huge, enormous bombs if they can never find you, right? And like the Vietnamese, like the Vietnamese were using strategies like the foxholes. Is it foxholes? But they were doing things that the Americans didn't even know. And I remember on the after the Iraq War started, I remember listening to a lecture that was given by military personnel, and he was talking about how, like, when I was running the war games on the lead up to the Iraq War, I'd be like, okay, well, what happens if they do things like get into a boat and take just a bazooka, basically, and just fire it into the side of our ships, just broadside them. And the response that I basically got from the military was, yeah, they're not going to do that, right? And so a lot of what the American military does relies on the idea that their enemy is going to be fairly uncreative, right? And I think that you see in with Al Qaeda and with the Vietnamese generally that like creative warfare and creative strategies are effective, that they work, right? They're a grinder, they're a meat grinder because the Americans are just coming in with like overwhelming force and just blowing the shit out of you. But yeah, a system of tunnels, exactly. Yep, it's only a matter of time until what happens in Ontario filters down to the rest of the provinces, like Nova Scotia. Yep, I think that's absolutely true. Like, the capitalist system is not going to just leave these things alone. They're not just going to leave these things be. They're not just going to say, oh, this is fine. Like, we're siphoning away a little bit of the wealth that we steal from the populace into public care, and that's like they're not going to do that. They are going to dismantle all of these systems. All right, 1 second, guys. My dog has been whining this whole time at me. What are you whining about, dude? No more whining. No more whining. No more whining. Come say hi. Come say hi. Come say hello, little Milo. Oh. Oh, Milo. It's always a disaster with you, isn't it? Sorry, guys, if that bunged up your ears or something. Oh, it's always a disaster with my little pug. Always, always, always a little disaster. Always, always, always a little disaster. Little disaster pug, little face just like a frog. He's my little disaster pug. Disaster pug. I know, buddy. Everything's a disaster with you. Jasden says, I mean, big bombs don't work on non-centralized fighting cells. Not to mention, usually small groups of fighters are better to respond to quick changes, benefits from a lack of top-down control. The that type of like guerrilla warfare strategy, I feel as though the reason why it's effective, and the Vietnamese are like the big one that we all are aware of and that we talk about a lot. Oh, I know. Is that the Vietnamese understand what's going on in the land and they know what's going on in their own territory, right? And that it's not like the Americans don't really have like a base of operations. They don't really own any territory there outside of the territory that they can seize. And so you already have like people who generally understand what's going on. And so that kind of thinking, it works in that kind of sense. But if it happens in Texas, where all the military personnel are from, like, it's probably not going to be as effective, frankly. I mean, we're starting to see the very drastic actions that the military system is willing. Like, what are they doing? This cop town? I haven't even taken the time to look into this, but like, what state is this happening in? It's happening in like Atlanta or something, where they're literally tearing down a forest to build like a cop town. Like, it's just fucking ridiculous. Compton says, I don't really care how free people feel. I would just rather there be an overwhelming state that kept people free from a parasitic market. Get your needs and cope. Don't be a poopy butt wrecker. Well argued, Compton. Overwhelmingly convincing, right? But I mean, what you are fundamentally saying is that we, like, the state should be operating for the benefit of the people. That right now we have a dictatorship of capital, and the whole argument from the communist perspective is that we should have a dictatorship of the proletariat, and that we should have a system that responds to the needs of the workers, not a system that responds to the needs of the ownership class. And, of course, the ownership class will always say, like, oh, well, the ruling class will always turn parasitic and work against us. Like, is that true? Like, it doesn't seem to be. Marxists Marcus Smith, the military-industrial complex is the best way to rob the taxpayer with the constant fear of the faraway bogeyman. Yeah, like that's the way it works, and people fall for it, man. Like people are all about it. Like and our film and our television are just loaded with it. Like what is Top Gun 2? Like you watch Top Gun and you're just like, oh wow, yeah, America, Team America, fuck yeah. Yeah, these guys have clearly not gone toe-to-toe with contractors. Non-centralized fighters. Ha ha ha. Your buddy is the contractor that will kill you. Yeah, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. That's where that's happening. And I haven't really taken the time to really look into it. I don't have like a big article about it, but like it just looks to me like the overwhelming police state that that America is becoming. It's just becoming more obvious and more straightforward. And it's going to lead to a destruction of the civil society. Like it will not be much longer before states start to think to themselves, or communities start thinking to themselves, why are we like what are we doing here? Like and the federal government is not going to respond, right? And so I feel like there's a general sense of balkanization that's going to happen throughout the society if we continue moving forward in this way. And like, well, here's one from Rainer Shea that kind of speaks to this idea. Like, we don't have any structure that's actually responding to the needs of the populace. Jastin asks, by dictatorship of the proletariat, you don't mean literal dictatorship, right? Well, no. That this is... I actually really hate that Marx uses this, that this is in the literature at all. But the idea is that right now we're living under a dictatorship of capital, right? All of the political systems have been co-opted by capital. And all of the systems that exist in... they're all focused on just capital. There is no system that actually exists for the needs of the workers. Or the proletariat, if you like. And so the idea is that you invert that relationship. And if you want to be rid of the capitalist class, if the goal is to be rid of capitalism as a force at all, and to be rid of the capitalist class, then you need a dictatorship of the proletariat that essentially says to the capitalists and the capitalist class, you no longer get to participate in the decision-making apparatus. Like, at all. This is a big reason why the wealthy are all pounding the pulpit about free speech, right? The reason why they're just screaming constantly at the top of their lungs about quote-unquote free speech is because they know what the leftist position is, which the leftist position is to take people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Donald Trump, and completely silence them. And put them in a corner and tell them you no longer get to participate in the conversation at all. Like, you don't get to own a politician. You don't get to come into the halls of power and have your voice heard, right? The best case scenario for these capitalists is that they get to live on a ranch and be forgotten. That should be the best case scenario for these guys. Just making sure you're not a tanky bud. Tanky is literally just a propagandistic slur. Like, it doesn't actually mean anything. Like, what's a tanky? Like, what is a tanky even? It's just something that people say. It's something that comes out of Vosh, right? Like FBI informant loser Vosh, who's just like everybody who's to the left of AOC is a tanky. Yeah. Chuds love to misrepresent the parts to mean, look, Marx literally wants 1984, yeah. Yeah, Compton's exasperation is always a great sense of solidarity, right? Jesus Christ, all of you will die being told what to do. Choose the authority of the working class and at least go to the grave knowing that maybe your children's children is set up to abolish the state. Yeah, this is exhausting. None of you will know freedom. Quit playing with yourself and come to terms with what must be done. Yeah, No, people like playing with themselves. Honestly, that's the number one reason why I don't engage in the debate bro shit. Because, like, I used to do it, and I just kind of came to the conclusion that, like, 99% of the time I was just watching somebody jerk off in front of me. Like, it was just intellectual masturbation. And they didn't really want to engage with the facts. They didn't really want to engage with evidence. They didn't really, like, and you see that all the time. I get people in here all the time who are like that. That the second I bring up any of the evidence or the facts that I have surrounding any of this kind of stuff, they just leave. Like that, and that's what happens. Like, and these people, like, and if you have a debate with them, they either just interrupt you, right? They just gish glosh the conversation, and they're not actually interested in engaging in it in a serious way because they're not serious people. They just want to jerk off in front of you, right? Or they just straight up leave. So you either get shouted at or the conversation ends. And so I'm not keen on it. I'm not actually that interested in it. Like, if you want to know the facts about a situation, if you want to have, like, an alternative position, you can ask about it, right? But if you want to have a conversation with me, my assumption is that you just want to talk your dumb shit and don't want to actually hear the other side. That's generally my assumption, because that's been my experience. And anytime I actually watch this debate bro shit, that's what I see. I just see, like, two guys jerking off in front of each other. And nothing happens, and there is no resolution. There is no change of mind or change of heart. Nobody has, like, a come to Jesus moment. It never happens. And I find the whole thing to be just embarrassing and frustrating. That if I were to actually engage in a debate, I would want it to be like a real, actual, structured, moderated thing, where someone stands up, says their piece, and then someone else stands up and says their piece. And maybe there could be, like, a little communication at the end. But this idea that I'm just going to, like, have a random conversation with a random person who probably doesn't know anything, and then is just going to scream at me over it. Like, nah, I'm not really keen on that. Not really that interested in that. I don't think that that's useful, interesting. And to me, that's the biggest part about it. I just don't think it's that interesting. I actually think it's really fucking boring. Who's actually watching this? Are there actually people who watch this debate bro shit and go, yeah, something serious happened? Like, go listen to a lecture from a PhD scholar, right? Stop listening to, like, Vosh and Destiny jerk off in front of each other. Like, go listen to people who actually have researched and studied and know things, right? Listen to the lecture. And if you're not going to do that, right, then go and listen to people who are going to tell you about those people, right? Like, why are we listening to the stupidest people in the room jerk off in front of each other? It's so fucking annoying. By tanky, I mean authoritarian left who defends the state of China and Russia and claims that Leninist transfer of literal dictatorship is necessary for communism to flourish. So, like, communists. Like, what you just described is just a communist, dude. Like, the authoritarian left who defends the state of China, hi, I defend the state of China, and Russia, and I defend the Soviet Union, and claims that Leninist transfer of a literal dictatorship. I mean, I think you have a pretty strong misunderstanding of what a dictatorship is. Like, the Soviet Union was not a dictatorship. Even the CIA admits it. Like, this, even the people responsible for disseminating the propaganda that the Soviet Union was a dictatorship know and understand that it was not. Like, and, like, if you want to have a conversation about what's going on in China and Russia, we can have that conversation. But, like, and again, I think you're just watching too much fucking Bosch, dude. Like, anyone to the left of AOC is a tanky, I guess. I think that what the Soviet Union did was extremely beneficial to its own people. I think that the communist revolution there worked. It was extremely successful. They took an agrarian economy and in a very short period of time created an industrial superpower that was the first people into space and defeated the Nazis. Like, to say that the Soviet Union was a failure and that communism didn't work there is to just admit that you don't know anything about the subject. Like, this is why I don't want to debate bro people, man. Like, people saying this dumbass shit that, like, oh, by somehow, because you don't completely 100% buy into fucking the Western propaganda of all of this and what the CIA unequivocally says 100%, then you're a tanky and I can just ignore you. Like, shut up. Like, it's just embarrassing. And in regards to China, like, China's becoming the strongest economy in the world. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, the Maoist revolution was extremely successful. They managed to defeat American, British, and Japanese imperialists, plus the ruling class of their own country, managing to take power, and then eliminate things like homelessness, the drug epidemic, right? Industrialized over a very, very short period of time. And then the Dengist reforms were incredibly successful. They built literal cities and have had an economic boom, lifting 800 million people out of poverty. So successful has been the communists in China that the capitalists are trying to take credit for it, even though that's fucking embarrassing as shit. The Chinese Communist Party has had their hand on the rudder the entire time, and China's been flourishing, just absolutely flourishing because of it. And to say that defending, like, this is like what Michael Parenti always said about this, right? Western leftists tend to defend every revolution except the ones that are successful. Well, in the Soviet Union, you had a successful revolution, and it stayed in place until post-Stalin, basically. When Stalin died, that's when they began to move away from it. And you had the quote-unquote collapse of communism, which was really just the ruling class moving to try to integrate itself in the Western system, because it's the only real option they had left after the Sino-Soviet split. And people like Gorbachev and Yeltsin were just sort of weak bureaucrats, ultimately, who I think didn't really have much of a vision to move forward to. And and I mean, you could take a look at, like, and this idea that there's a Leninist transfer of a literal dictatorship. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, Soviet means council. That's the literal definition of it. And the Soviet Union was a series of democratic councils where they all voted on things. And did they have an executive? Yes. They voted for an executive, and the person that they voted for was Lenin and then Stalin. Like, but I'm a tanky, I guess. If you just want to shut your brain off and say words, are they legitimate democracies? They're not Westminster parliamentary democracies, if that's what you mean. Like, what is a legitimate democracy? Like, what does that mean? Is our democracy a legitimate democracy? I mean, I don't think so. Our democracy doesn't respond to the needs of our own public, right? Like, and there have been Princeton studies on this. Princeton recently had a study where they published that what the public actually wants is never what happens. That that our political system responds exclusively to the donator class, so it's corruption all the way through. So, like, by what definition do we exist in a democracy? So I would say not at all. Compare that to what's going on in China or what happened in the Soviet Union, where those structures were 100% responding to what the people needed or wanted, right? Like, the Chinese Communist Party is looking at what the people want or say or demand of them and are responding to it. And the people go and vote. They put people into positions of power and authority. Like, it's just whether or not the structure is actually responding to the needs of the public. And you can take a look at all this. Like, there's a National People's Congress. This is the structure of the communist of the government. National People's Congress. You can read all about it. The Wikipedia article is thorough, and while they love to use the buzzwords like authoritarian and all that kind of garbage, you can see just right here, right? Like, there's a structure of it. People are voted to it. that it's not Westminster parliamentary democracy. Like, the reason why our system is so stupid and has resulted in stupidity across the board is that it's essentially a popularity contest, and then the person that wins the pageant gets to write laws. So obviously, what happens is that you get to choose between the two richest people in the room, and then the rich people write a bunch of laws to make themselves richer. That's precisely what happens every single time. So it's no wonder we're in this free fall collapse. Whereas in China, you are elected to a body that then says, okay, welcome, but we need to see if you're smart or capable or competent at all. And they actually test you, and they put you places, and they say, okay, how'd you do? Right? And they vet you. There's a whole education process to be like, are you here just to make money for yourself, or are you actually here to improve the quality of life for the Chinese citizenry? And it's literally 10 stages that you go through. Xi Jinping went through this very thing. And you can see here's the body of it. And oh, wow, what a dictatorship. It's got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's got 9 parties and 10 independent. And you can see here very clearly the largest body is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, right? Which makes sense, right? It's the party of Mao. Mao got them through. Then it's the party of Deng. Deng is the one that did the market reforms, which were wildly successful. And now it's the party of Xi Jinping, who has gone through a period of decorruptifying the system, right? Getting rid of the corruption, ensuring that the capitalists don't infect the system the way that they've infected our system. And it's been wildly successful. The people of China are over the moon by it. But it's not the only party. And like, if it's a dictatorship, then why are there other parties, right? And then, and you'll notice the largest group here, independent. Just straight up. Just like independent. People who are just like, yeah, people like me. I should be able to go up there. And they're like, yeah, come on in, right? And then you end up with a executive, just like every other system that exists everywhere. This body elects an executive, and that executive is, and the reason why you want that, and it was the same in the Soviet Union. The reason why you want an elected executive like this is so that you have an agile group that's capable to quickly respond to things as they occur. Like, you don't need to mobilize 3,000 people. You need to mobilize 200, right? Like, it's just easier to do. And this group then is subordinate to the larger group. Like, this group audits what this group does. And if this group says what you did was inappropriate, then it's inappropriate. But that rarely happens because, like, why would you bother? Like, what's the point? Anyway, and you can read all about it. It's right here. Like, it's everything I just said is completely uncontroversial. Like, that's the thing that I think Westerners really hate. That I talk very often about a trifecta of failure, right? And that trifecta of failure is the worship of money, the worship of the individual, and the worship of ignorance. Right? And so many times that I have done this, where I've talked about the National People's Congress, and I've talked about the Chinese, and literally the person on the other end is just like, that's just propaganda bullshit. You're just falling for the Chinese propaganda system. You're just spreading around commie propaganda. And it's just like, the worship of stupidity, the worship of ignorance is an absolute corrosive just bile that exists in the society. We don't know fucking anything about communism in the West. We are desperately illiterate. Even though it's right here, you can look at the structure of the system, you can learn all about it. It's right fucking here. Like, and it's not hard. It's not difficult. And like, you find out very, 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 very quickly that, oh yeah, this is a democracy. Is it structured exactly like our democracy, where there's a Congress and a Senate and a presidency, and then there's the Supreme Court, and they're all run by rich people? No. Like, obviously not. It's a completely different country with its own legacy and its own history, which, again, you can find that out. Like, it's not hard to find these things out. You just got to do it. But what we love to do here in the West is just go, yeah, it's a dictatorship. Xi Jinping is a dictator. He runs the place and everybody listens to him. And if you don't listen to him, you get shot. Like, boom, 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 whoa. And in my view, the success of a governing system should be based entirely on the favorability of the people who are being governed by it. So the thing that really started to convince me to take the Chinese governing system more seriously was when I found a Harvard poll, a Harvard study that had that over the course of 17 years, or I think it was 18 years, they were polling the people of China about what they felt about their own system, about their own government, over a period of 17 or 18 years. And not only was there high favorability, like literally as high as 90% at some points, but that favorability went up over time. So even if it was a dictatorship, which it isn't, obviously, it's right here in front of your face, even if it was a dictatorship, I would still say, yeah, but the people are in for it. Like, they're over the moon about it. Like, literally 80-90% of them are telling Harvard University, that, yeah, this is great. And as it goes forward, we like it even better. And it's pretty easy to see why, right? The successes of the Chinese Communist Party are enormous. If the things that were happening in China were happening in your country, you would not be able to shut up about it. Like, for real, you would not be able to shut up about it. If the high-speed rail systems that China was putting in and have been putting in were coming into your country, you'd never shut up about it. If the infrastructure that China had put in was happening as rapidly as happened in China were happening to you today, you'd never shut up about it. If everyone around you was being lifted out of poverty, if the opioid crisis was eliminated, if everybody was getting employed, if all services were becoming more egalitarian and wealth was being spread throughout the society, you would never shut up about it. Like, what is happening in China and what has happened in China over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years is nothing short of a fucking economic miracle. And it's all happened on Marxian principles and Marxist ideas. E. French coming in. I disagree with you on a pragmatic level, but I really like hearing you speak. You know what, French? I'll take it. That is a nice comment. And I want it made clear, and I'll say this over and over again. I don't mind if people disagree with me. I don't mind that. Right? I don't mind if somebody's going to come in and say, I disagree with you. Here's why. I think, well, have you thought about this? That's one thing. So please feel free to do that. Please feel free to push back. And if you can show me that I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong. My own chat's done that to me on several occasions. I have a Discord where they love to do that to me. And because I think that's very important. But if you're going to come in here and wag your dick around and pretend like you know something when you don't, then Seraphim, you're the most recent one. You're the most recent one for sure, Seraphim. Although that was more of a step. Anyway, I don't want to get into it. Okay. What the fuck was I just saying? Yeah. I oversold my case is what it was. That's all that happened there. I oversold my case, and you were right to do what you did. That's good. Okay, Jastin says, I know I have to read a shit ton of theory. Dude, yeah, it's never ending, by the way. Like, right when I think I'm like brushed up and ahead of the game and I know what I'm doing, then there's something else, and like there's some other person like that, there's so much. There's just so much. The I really fucking hate their idea of social credit. Social credit is not different than the credit system here in America. It's the same thing. Like, it's just, if you put spooky music under it and you go, boo, and then talk about it, it sounds creepy, but it's actually not different than the credit system that exists in America and here in the West generally. And the people, and they've actually stepped back on the social credit thing because the people of China themselves were like, I don't know about this, and the government system was like, yeah, okay, like, so they've got like a credit system that exists, but and because their primary ruling systems and their primary systems that exist in China are not owned by capitalists, it does operate slightly differently and on slightly different principles, but it is more or less the same idea as a credit score. Like, so if you're standing up and saying, I hate that idea of the social credit system, well, then you hate the idea of the credit system here and the credit score in North America. Because it's the fucking same thing. But to me, it still looks they rely on commodification and capitalism with a coat. Yeah, I mean, what you're commenting on there is the Dengist period. That what's important to remember. So 40% of China's economy, and it's in decline because of the Taiwan thing, and Biden is telling Americans, you either stay in China or you come home, right? Like that kind of thing is going on. But for a while now, about 40% of China's economy has been private free market capitalism, right? And basically that happened because of the Dengist reforms. Deng was the leader that came in after Mao. And essentially he said, let's let some people get rich first. Let's allow foreign investors to come in. And the result of it is that in the capitalist zeal to exploit cheap labor and to get into alternative markets, America essentially deindustrialized itself and transferred its industrial base to China. And so now China finds itself into a position where they have all this industry. They're the ones that are the producers now. They're the ones making stuff. They're the ones actually generating stuff, which talks to your thing, French. Like, how do you think wealth is created? It's created by workers creating stuff. That's what it is. Labor creates wealth. And America pivoted away during the Dengist period and what we would call the neoliberal period. It pivoted away from being an industrial country that created stuff to just being a financialization country, and a country that plays this sort of financial shell game of money based at the barrel of a gun, essentially. Like, yeah, we can buy stuff with our money and our stuff has value, because if you don't think it has value, we'll blow you up. And and when that happened, when the Dengist period began, lots of like the hardcore communists and the Maoists said that it was the end of communism, that it was, and the capitalists also believed it was the end of communism, right? That, oh, it's over now, the communist period is done, it's just like the Soviet Union, the Chinese are gonna bend the knee to international capital, and that'll be it. But what actually happens is that Deng's idea of letting foreign capital into China to build its own industry, build its industrial capacity, and then spread that wealth into the society in a more egalitarian way, worked because of the strength of the National People's Congress. And when Xi Jinping comes into power, and the leaders after Deng, because there were several leaders after Deng, they carried through with that vision that we don't really understand this in the West. Here's something we don't understand at all in the West, right? We believe here in the West in this idea that there's a Democrat will come in and he'll do something. And then a Republican will come in and blow up everything the Democrat was doing. And then the Democrat will come in and blow everything up the Republican was doing. So this competition, which is supposed to breed innovation, really just ends up being two political parties stepping on each other's dick all the time. And nothing actually happens and nothing can get done because you end up just constantly blowing everything up. Conversely, in China, you end up with a passing of the baton. That's how I've come to describe it. That the baton passes from Deng to like Jintao, and then from him to Xi Jinping, and they it's not like Xi Jinping comes in and says everything my predecessor did was a failure and we're going to move forward and make China great again and all this dumb shit. He says, okay, we're on a trajectory, and now I have been elected to be the leader to continue this trajectory. And if they want to change something, they all come together during one of the congresses and they discuss it and vote on it and decide if they're going to alter course, right? And so because China has this long-term thinking, they're a 4,000-year-old civilization, right? They have this long-term thinking and this idea of past and doing honor to the previous administration instead of denigrating the previous administration. And moving forward in that way, they're able to build over long scale periods of time. Whereas here in the West, we think in 4-month intervals at best, and maybe at best in 4-year intervals, right? So election cycle by election cycle, and we don't really understand the concept of a long-term plan. Like free market capitalism, the idea of let the free market decide is no different than saying let chaos reign, right? Just let chaos reign. Chaos will figure it out. Let's let the fire out of the fireplace and let the fire decide about what's good or bad. Whereas the Chinese are like, no, you keep the fire in the fireplace, and when you need to interact with the fire, you use tools, right? And like you take the benefits of the fire, but you keep the fire over there. And and so what we're seeing now in the Xi Jinping period, in Xi's period, is a consolidation, that there is a buildup of industrial power, and now it's up to Xi, and Xi Jinping has been creating more egalitarian structures. It's how they lifted all of these people out of poverty in China. They built a bunch of infrastructures. Literally, cities sprung up out of nowhere, right? Literally, they were just like, build a city here. And they built a city there. And they just went, there is a replica of the city of Paris in China. And they just built it because they wanted to. Just like, vroom. Yeah, thank you, Ligon Disease. Deng, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, Xi. That's correct. And China stuck to the plan. And Xi has you'll never completely eliminate corruption, but they have, like here in America, we have a system called lobbying, where you literally can just bribe officials, and that's completely fine and completely normal. You can just say, I have $1 billion. I'm going to give it to you to run for president. And that's considered normal. It's not considered corruption. Whereas in China, that's fucking corruption. They actually take that very, very seriously. They execute billionaires who do that shit. And and so there's a strong line that exists between the wealthy class and the ruling class of China. And so what Xi is doing is spreading the wealth, creating a more egalitarian structures. They recently eliminated private education systems because they see them as a way to build class power in the society, and to create egalitarian structures, while simultaneously, and this is actually very important to understand about what's going on with Xi Jinping, is that he is preparing China for a war with America. And that's something that is deeply unfortunate, that the Chinese people are not looking forward to, that the Communist Party is not happy about, but that they see as something of an inevitability. And they are not going to return to the 100 years of humiliation. They are not going to allow America to come over and defeat them. They are not going to go down without a fight. And Xi Jinping is preparing China for a war. And there's just no other way to discuss it. That when the war finally breaks out, China's hope is that they will have built strong, stable institutional structures that will be able to withstand the consequences of that war breaking out. And their hope is that their structures will be stronger than the capitalist structures. Like, one of the things that the communists are Marxists, right? So their critique of capitalism is like, yeah, sure, capitalists will come in and they'll build like a bunch of wealth and it'll happen all very rapidly. But then the system collapses, right? You keep hearing this shit, these neoliberal hacks who go on like Joe Rogan or whatever, and they keep talking about how like, oh, China's going to collapse and there's all, oh my goodness, there's all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, China's not going to collapse. The capitalist structures within China are going to collapse. And no one is more aware of that than the Chinese communists. And when those structures begin to collapse, the Chinese, like in 2008, we had a housing market crash. Well, what did we do? When the housing market crash happened here in America, we bailed out the rich people who caused the crisis, told all the poor people to get fucked, arrested basically no one except one guy who ended up just going to like a villa, like literally like it's like an island villa that he retired to, and that's considered a prison, and that's what we did. Well, in China, a similar housing crash happened. They arrested the rich people responsible, executed several of the billionaires, seized the property, and distributed it to the populace. Like, that's the difference. That, sure, the capitalist systems will collapse as they always did, as they always do, but it's how you respond to it. And so the Chinese are doing very, very well right now, and they're building a society. They call themselves Chinese with they call themselves socialist with Chinese characteristics, right? They're socialist with Chinese characteristics. That's what they call themselves, and their plan is to move forward towards communism, which they think they can actually achieve by like 2050. So, and the Americans are not going to let them do it for free. So that's the reason why I support what's going on in China. That it's they haven't been fundamentalists about it, but the truth is that Marx didn't give a blueprint for how to get to communism. That he was primarily responsible for laying the groundwork of a critique against capitalism, and basically said to future generations, it's up to you to build your society up towards communism. And there's been a lot of different ideas about how to achieve that. And so it's one of the China is laying a pretty strong groundwork for how countries should look at how do we actually achieve this. And even more importantly than that, China is building the systems. It's literally building the infrastructure. The Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS system are institutional systems that China is building to allow other countries to get connected to it on a basic trade level, but also to spread wealth in an egalitarian way that disconnects from this horrendous system of capital ownership. So that's why I support the Chinese. It doesn't make me a tanky. I just know something about them. It would be nice to have a long-term plan, but it entrusts too much of a ruling class full of corrupt, sociopathic lizards. I was formerly a Leninist, but now libertarian. Voluntary agreements. There's no such thing as a voluntary agreement in capitalism. It just doesn't exist. Like, it just straight up doesn't exist. If the choice is between work this job or be homeless, then you have no choice whatsoever. So that's a big reason why I take a look at libertarians and kind of go like, oh yeah, nice thought, but if the choice is between homelessness or work, we all know what everyone's going to pick, and to pretend like it's a voluntary choice is something of a self delusion, frankly. But I can understand your point. Like, our ruling class is so insipid and corrupt that it's completely impossible. Like, we here in the West tend to believe that this is natural, that this is always the way it's going to be. That's why it's so easy to convince people that Stalin was a monster and Xi Jinping's a dictator and all this kind of stuff, because we take our own experience and our own ruling class and project it onto other people. And the truth is that we don't really know anything about them. We don't really know anything about their society. We don't really know anything about the structures. We just take our own psychopathic class of lizard-brained psychos who fucking go to Jeffrey Epstein's island, rape little girls and shit, and just say, oh, it's got to be that way. It's completely natural. And in my view, it's just a defense mechanism. It's just something that we do because we can't actually handle the truth, which is that we're degenerate. Like, we're the problem. It is us, for sure. It is us. That other ruling classes and other rulers across the world do not act this way. Like, we're the rogue state. We're the terrorists. We are the ones outside of the norm. And the reason why that's the case is because we have adopted a system of capital. And we have a structure that empowers the psychopath class, that says to the society, are you a psychopath? Then you will be heavily rewarded. Whereas if you are not a psychopath, you'll be chased out of the society, lazy, degenerate, you just need to work harder. Like, the gaslighting is the way that they come at you, right? But even more than the gaslighting, if you actually try to act like a good, honest person and not exploit people, then you're going to be poor. That's the nature of the structure. There's no such thing as working a job here in the capitalist system without exploiting someone. And so if you want to not exploit people and you want to live a good, honest life, well, get fucked. And so when we talk about our own society, or when we talk about our own ruling class, it's not about replacing the people. It's about replacing the system. Correct. Look at Finland. That government actually cares about people and doesn't only seek to steal from them. But I make the argument, and I've made the argument several times, that places like Finland and Sweden, like the places that we call the Scandinavian countries, that like Bernie Sanders is like, that's the type of socialism I want. Well, those things only happened, the quote-unquote social democracies only happened because of the looming threat of communism. That during the Soviet period, there were communists in places like Finland saying, hey, if you don't actually give us anything, we're going to do a revolution. And the capitalists responded through concessions. This is how the New Deal comes into place in America. That it's not that capitalists stand up and say, oh, we should do nice things and be nice. It's that they're afraid that there's going to be a revolution and they're going to lose the means of production. And so they respond through concessions bargaining. That's basically what you see in Finland. Now, Finland is an interesting case because it's actually kind of stuck. It's been a bit more resilient. But it won't be long until the capitalists start to say, oh, hey, why don't we? And in fact, there have been plenty of examples in places like Finland where the ruling class has started to do exactly that, but have been prevented. And how have they been prevented? Through mass general strike. That when the ruling class starts to work against when the ruling class begins to work against the working class in places like Finland, everybody stops working and gets in the street. And then that's the end of that conversation, right? So that happens here in Canada. If they start to privatize our healthcare, for example. No. That's it. That's all we do. Like, but my point is that if you look at Finland and you look at the history of how did they get their social democracy, they got their social democracy because of strong, virulent, militant communists. Jazz didn't say, I still do hate the credit system of America. Oh, I despise the credit system of America. I think it's despicable. I get it, but it gives an immense amount of power to the banks and bullshit ways of building trust with something that is so disassociative. Yeah. No. The credit system is, like, unabashedly wrong. It should be done away with, for sure. Like, you're not going to hear me defend the credit system. Like, I just bring it up because, like, if you're against the social credit system that exists in China, like, it's not that much different than the idea of the credit system in America. But and it is different, though, because the systems are interacting. Like, the ruling class isn't run by capitalists. So it's run by the elected people in China. So it is, like, different in that regard, but it's not like this creepy, weird thing. John, yesterday you mentioned the Chinese royals moving to Taiwan. Were you talking about the Ming court fleeing the Qing? No, during the Maoist period, the ruling class of China was in Taiwan. Like, I'm sure what you're discussing, like the Ming court fleeing the Qing, is real. Like, the history of China is 4,000 years old, dude. Like, there's lots of times when I'm sure people fled to Taiwan. Like, Taiwan's the perfect place for a ruling class to flee to. Like, absolutely. If I was the ruling class and there was suddenly some kind of revolution and we were losing control of it, I would definitely, like, yeah, let's bounce to this island they can't get to. That's what the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing is about. Like, they want to build little islands that they can escape to and have sex with little girls. Like, that's what they're all about, right? Yeah, the ruling class at that time. I forget what their official name was, but they were just like like they were just like fucking kings and shit. Like, it was just bullshit. It's like, but they didn't have the same level of power and authority that we associate with that. They were more performative. Anyway. U.S. lawmakers, for those out you in TikTok land, right? Those of you in TikTok land, you should know this. U.S. lawmakers are pushing nationwide to ban TikTok. GOP Senator Josh Hawley has dubbed the video sharing app China's backdoor into Americans' lives. What is 100% happening with this is that they are using, it's China, it's a China app, as a big excuse because the servers for TikTok are in America, right? And the servers are in America, controlled by American companies. So the idea that it's China's backdoor is absurd from the outset. And in my view, what's actually happening is that Google, Facebook, like the other apps, are struggling against TikTok, and they don't know how, and they can't compete. They're losing. And so they're all getting together, and they're going to try to ban it. So much for your free speech. The Ricky Jade, don't know if I've ever seen you here before. Good to see you. Hope you have a beautiful comment. Capitalism led to the exploitation of the natural and labor resources of other countries. And now, for a long time, it's turned inward to exploiting groups within the nation. Absolutely. And as soon as they can't exploit the nations any longer, as soon as they can't exploit the labor, or they can't make any money, they'll just abandon us. Like, that's what's happening. That what we are experiencing is a process of extraction followed by abandonment. That you're going to see it, it's going to happen with Walmart first. That's going to be the one that's going to shock everybody, right? Like, we all look at Walmart and we're like, oh, Walmart's just a given. Walmart will always be there. Well, Walmart will eventually say, well, I can't make any money here, and it'll just shut its doors. And eventually the Waltons, right, the owners of Walmart, will just sell the brand and just become general investors, the way that people like David Thompson are, right, or Warren Buffett, right? Just literally, I exist in the financial sense. I don't do anything or produce anything. I just have money that I've extracted from the public and from the populace. But now all of these Walmarts are closed. So, Mr. Memes, I love your name, by the way, bud. Mr. Memes, that's a fun name. Why do you think capitalism is dead? I mean, how many collapses do you need to see, bud? Like, for real, like, how many collapses do you actually need to see? You need to see the .com, like, in my lifetime, there was the .com collapse, there is the housing market collapse that happened, there's the market collapse that happened over COVID. You're seeing the society go into a recession. In many sectors, we're already worse than the Great Depression. Like, this idea that capitalism is working, inequality has never been worse. There are people literally shooting themselves into space. Like, they're just, like, my question for you is what convinces you it isn't? Like, what convinces you it's not? Like, the only thing that's keeping this zombie corpse shuffling around is that we have a ruling class that keeps siphoning wealth into it. And it's all going to collapse. Like, it's going to collapse in a huge, massive way. What we are doing literally cannot be sustained. That I am just a person looking at a building that's leaning over like this and going, oh, that bitch is falling over. That's it. Like, I'm not trying to predict anything. It's not predictive to say, like, okay, there was a building, now it's like this. Well, chances are good, right? Like, how many times have you seen a building go like that and then go, oh, you know what? Never mind. Like, the building is here. It's going to go like that. And when it goes like that, a lot of people are going to go, whoa, what happened? And I'm going to be going, yeah, dude, and I was telling you when it was like this. Like, it's here. And it's obviously like that. Like, the American system, the Western system of capital is a catastrophe. And it is failing utterly. And it is going to blow up. Like, what we are looking at is a bunch of people who have been partying away, being like, whoa, what a great, amazing system. And the floor is going to bottom out. And we're going to enter, like, a Great Depression period. It's going to be, in my view, it's actually going to be worse than the Great Depression. Because I think during the Great Depression, people were actually like, okay, this is a problem. How do we solve it? What are we going to do? And none of that is going to happen in America this time around. That the ruling class is too psychotic, too disconnected. They don't care about the average lives of anyone whatsoever, under any circumstances. And then on top of that, the citizenry is so gullible and stupid and lazy that or I shouldn't say lazy, but apathetic, that they're just going to eat it. So it's the most likely thing that's going to happen is a period of balkanization, if you ask me. In response to you, that guy, doink. There is a protest planned at Queen's Park, February 25th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. What if the housing market bubble and the resulting collapse came directly from the non-market government guarantees on subprime mortgages? No, look, market crashes happen in market systems, and because that's how markets work. That they always experience crash, like, and so you just should not have a housing market. It simply should not exist. Like, do not take necessities and create a market out of them. They will always collapse because that's what markets do. They always collapse. They always experience periods of crises. And you can try to, like, sort out and find out and be like, well, it was this and it was that and there was this and there was that and all that kind of stuff all you want. But market systems are so much larger than the individuals who are attempting to manage them. They will always inevitably collapse. So just don't tie necessities to them. It's fine if you want to do it with your luxury markets or whatever, right? Because when they collapse, everybody goes, ah, shit. And then starts again, you don't get an Xbox that year. Like, that's what happens. And this whole, like, pivot that happens in the conversation where it's like, actually, it was government guarantees. It was who owns the government? Like, I completely reject this whole narrative that comes out of the capitalist class that the trouble is government. And it was the government getting involved in it. It was the government's problem. And we've got to get less government in our life. And the government's the thing we got to government the government. And that government's the government or government. That one on the 21st is wrong. I'm going to fix that guy. That was a mistake. Typo. Error. Forget about the 21st. Forget about the 21st. No, forget about the 21st. Forget about the 21st. This is the one that I was talking about. Unless you can show me something. But the one I was talking about was this one, and I was wrong. My mistake. Error. No 21st, yes 25th. I am sleepy and tired most of the time these days. And so the government, right? Oh, it's the government. We need to get the government out of the thing. If the government is the government, the government's the government. We got to government the government and get the government out of the government. And if the government gets out of the government, then the government will bless the government. Then the government won't government or government. Who owns the government? Like, who owns the government? You'll never hear these rich guys and these people like your Milton Friedman types actually say, like, oh, who owns the government? Well, who owns the government? The rich people who own the market. So when you point at the government who governments the government to govern the government, and exclude the fact that it's these guys that own it, who owns the lobbies? So the very people who are benefiting from the collapse of these systems, who get bailed out by every single time by the government, who are the ones who are manipulating the market in the first place, are the ones who own the government, who put the legislation in. And the reason why they put the legislation in is so that they can benefit themselves. And then when the market collapses, they get bailed out. They win no matter what. They win no matter what because they've rigged the system. And if all you're going to do is stand up and say, well, it's the government that's the problem, then the people who own it are going to go, oh, wow, thank goodness they didn't point the finger at the person responsible. Thank goodness they're blaming the government instead of the people who actually own the businesses, own the market, and own the government. Like, thank goodness nobody's paying attention to us. Like, which is exactly what this narrative is doing. Like, that's exactly what this narrative is doing. Like, it's, oh yeah, we're not going to pay any attention to Warren Buffett or BlackRock or Vanguard or any of this sort of stuff. We're going to pay attention to the government. I am just so down on the possibility we can elect the right side, right set of selfless, wise overlords, disempower them. I mean, I tend to agree with that idea. Like, I think the electoral system is dead. I don't think it can be reformed. Like, especially the American one. The American electoral system was designed to keep, and it's in the document, it was designed to keep power rather, in the wealth of the nation. Right? That's how they designed it. And so the idea that we're going to elect a different set of people, well, no, you're going to elect a different set of rich people. Because those are the only people who can be elected to that system. Because that's how the system is designed, explicitly. It's in the paper. Like, we have to completely redraw the Constitution. That's the truth. And one of the failures of Western civilization is in this trifecta. Well, this right here, the worship of the individual. And how that manifests in this conversation, the worship of the individual, is this idea that, oh, we'll just elect a different group. A different group of individuals will do a better job, right? That's essentially the heart of electoral politics, is that a different group of individuals will do a better job. But that's not how it works, because those individuals are actually beholden to the structures that they are elected into, right? They can't just It's not like the fucking Wild West. They can't just be like that. There are institutional structures that exist, right? And if all you're going to do is worship the individual and say, oh, we'll just vote in another group of individuals, well, then that completely ignores the reality of the institutional structure and the institutional power that exists. And the great tragedy of the American system is that it is built to be an oligarchy. That's how it's designed. It's designed to exclusively respond to the needs of the rich, and the rich only give a shit about themselves. And that's the way of it. And the only time the American system has ever responded to the people in a meaningful way has been when there have been thousands of people outside their door demanding that they do so. That's literally the only time. There has never been a period of time at any moment in American history where any politician has gone, we should do this because it's good for the people. It has always been because there's been thousands of people calling for a revolution outside their door. And no other time. Nixon didn't put in the EPA because he was a good man. Obviously, he was a sociopathic serial killer. The New Deal didn't get put in because the people who were in power were good people. They were doing it because there were communists outside their door saying, we could overthrow you. They did it in the Soviet Union. We could do it here. Like, this is how the ruling class responds to people. They don't give a shit at all about your electoral politics. They don't care, even a little. In my opinion, electoral politics is exclusively vanity projects. That it is just people like Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't want to become the president to like go out there and save the presidency and drain the swamp and all this kind of dumb shit. He wanted to be the president so that he could be the big shot. So it's exclusively a vanity project. And that's all this is for all of them. No exceptions. And that includes Bernie Sanders. And that includes AOC. It is exclusively, oh wow, I'm the congressman from Maine. Good for me. Nothing else. The system needs to be dismantled and reformed. So it's just utterly the truth. All right, TikTok, my phone's about to die, so I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. I hope you're all doing well out there in TikTok land. God bless you, each and every one of you. Good luck out there. Farewell to the TikTok. Oh, I had slightly less viewers, but more likes. That's nice. My favorite stat that they give you a stat list, and my favorite one is always this. You got more views than 99% of hosts with a similar following. That's what makes me feel good. That's what makes me feel good. I got more views than 99% of other people with similar followings. Like, and just watch, it's going to get banned. Right? Like, I finally have found a way to get like a pipeline to actually grow the channel again. And TikTok's going to get banned. Damn, it's my daughter's birthday party that morning. Kids always up in my shit. Yeah, tell me about it. Communism has its advantages and disadvantages. Joseph Stalin was a terrible man, was he? What makes you say that? What makes you say that? However, we shouldn't tax the poor just so that said tax money can go to some politician's pocket. I agree with that. Marcus says, I was in the infantry. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, bud. Our small units tactics are far better than any other coalition forces we trained. Disparaging the U.S. military doesn't make sense because it's one of the most overfunded, experienced war-making organizations. I mean, isn't that why we should be disparaging the United States military? Like, it is one of the most overfunded, experienced war-making organizations in recent history. It seems to me like that by itself is a good reason to be like, yeah, That's bad. That sounds bad. Communism is a very old-fashioned economic system, meaning it's not very kept up with modern-day technology. Like, banning money wouldn't really be efficient, but taking away tax money would be good. Well, one of the theories of money, right, is that the trouble is not that money exists as an organizational system. It's that we worship it. Like, we have put money ahead of clean drinking water, clean land, clean, like, having a clean environment. That the theory that has always existed like Trotsky writes about this, is that it's not that money will we'll do away with it. It's that eventually the populace will just sort of forget about money. That money will still exist, and there will still be people in the society who are responsible for ensuring that the scales are balanced, right? And those people will still ensure that the scales are balanced and that things are attributed where they need to be attributed. But those people will be like tool makers, right? Like, you don't really know how your iPhone works, but you interact with it nonetheless. But there are people who do know how your iPhone works, and not everybody in the society needs to not everybody in the society needs to be a financial wizard, and nor should they. And the idea that we live in a society today that insists that you have to have a fucking PhD in economics or finance to be able to have a basic conversation about basic things in your society is an aberration, and it's abhorrent. And that the theory is actually that just things will begin to loosen up so much for the worker and for the people that we'll just sort of forget about money. That we'll have these papers and we'll be like, oh yeah, that's money, right? But like, and a generation of people will come up and be like, what's money? And we'll be like, well, it's something that we use to trade goods and services and all of that. It's like, oh, well, like, can I get some? It's like, I mean, I guess if you want, but like, you've got your food over there. It's at the market. You can just go get it. You got your shelter. It's there, and like, money is transferred, but it's all behind the scenes now. Nobody actually interacts with it in a meaningful way, right? Like, there's no like, and if you want to see like, oh, do I have enough money to do something? You can go talk to someone about it, right? And they can tell you like, yeah, given, you know, your history and given who you are, we can make all this happen for you, sure. But just that the idea of living in a moneyless society, it's not that you're going to pull a switch and money will just be gone, and then you're all just be like, oh, I guess we have no money now. Like, that's not what it is. It's just that all of the things we use money for will be so widely available and so accessible to everyone that people will just kind of eventually forget about it. That and that's more or less the what's called the withering away of the state. It's not that the state will just be vanished, right? It's just that eventually all of the apparatus and all of the things that we use today, money, the power of the state, these sorts of things, will just wither away. That we'll all just sort of forget about them because they're not really that important in our lives anymore. And you might be able to find, like, you know, a small handful of people who are actually responsible for, like, yep, this is happening and this is happening, and you can see it. Here's the ledger, right? Like, you'll have your like blockchain or whatever, and you'll just be like, yeah, these transfers are happening and this is all going on, it's all fine, right? But you don't need to worry about it, you know? And like, the only reason that system, that idea gets upset is because a capitalist comes along and says, I own that. Or like the food system, I own the food now, and if you want food, you have to work for me. And here's your money, here's your chits to be able to get food. We've got to keep track of all of it, so you better keep track of it or you'll starve, right? Well, if that's gone, like, if it's literally just like, yeah, here I am, the institution responsible for ensuring food distribution, right? Come on in, get your food. And initially people will be like, well, I've got the money that I made from the work that I did and like all that. But eventually people will just come in and be like, oh, here's my daily allotment, or here's the food that I would like. And I'm going to leave. And people will be like, yeah, okay, bye. And it'll just kind of get forgotten about. That's more or less the idea. And that idea is sort of misunderstood. People sort of like, and it's the same thing when people talk about no religion in communism, right? That's another thing, right? It's a moneyless, stateless, religionless society. And people will be like, oh, the communists will come in and they'll kill everyone who doesn't agree with their religion. They'll purge the society of religion. That's the propaganda. But the truth is that these institutions just begin to wither away because people begin to see them as not helpful or useful. Like Catholicism, one of the places that Catholicism has spread the most rapidly in the last 20, 30 years is China. Communist China, right? Well, isn't China trying to be a religionless institution, all that kind of stuff? Well, if you poll the Chinese people, half of them are atheists. So it's just spreading that, like, so while the church has spread throughout China, the general opinion of the populace is also, yeah, we don't need it. Like, it doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't do anything. And so it's not that communists are going to come in and like abolish this stuff and pull a switch and destroy it. It's just that we're going to create institutional power that makes these things no longer interesting or worthwhile. We're not going to end money. We're just going to end the worship of money. Like, that's the difference. We're not going to end the individual. We're just going to end the worship of the individual. Like, we're not going to end ignorance. We're just going to end the worship of ignorance. The deadly trifecta. The worship of money, the worship of the individual, and the worship of ignorance. And it isn't that these things themselves are going to come in and be purged and cleansed and all that kind of stuff, but just the worship of them. Because right now we live in a society that worships these things. Like, money is God. As far as Westerners are concerned, money is God. That if you have money, you are a good person, by definition. That you are permitted to stand up and say whatever you like about any subject. You are an expert, and if somebody who has less money than you stands up and says that's incorrect, you literally can fire them and ruin their life. And that's fine. Like, that's a normal thing for us to do and exist in the society. And yeah, Bill Gates thinks he knows what's good for the entire planet because he has all this money, and he's the individual who he worships, who has it, and it doesn't matter that he's an ignorant idiot, right? Because we worship that anyway. And then all of this, what they've protected themselves with, so what this little religious ideology has done is protected itself with a obscure, difficult to comprehend and understand language called economics. That if you want to interact with the world at all, you have to present an economics argument. You have to have an economics argument that is built around this language structure of economics that is just a religious ideology. And if you actually come to understand it as a religious ideology, you can see it pretty clearly. Because there are a lot of things in our society and in our life that don't need you don't need to have a economics argument for it. Like, I would like to have a library. We should have libraries, right? And if somebody and so you have to create an economics argument for that. Well, if you have libraries, then people are better educated, and then you can produce more, and that increases productivity, right? Well, fuck that. How about just, we should have a library because it's nice. It's nice to have books. Books are nice. We should have murals everywhere because the place should look nice. We should have a clean environment because things are nice. Like, not everything needs to be an economics argument, but in this society, everything does need to be an economics argument because economics is the religious language of the ruling class. And if you actually study economics outside of the religious institutions that teach economics, you find out like if you actually read Smith, like you don't even need to read Marx. If you actually read Smith, if you read Smith and Ricard, the economists, you find out very quickly that like, oh, this is actually a legitimate science, and that these guys would have absolutely despised what is happening. Like, Smith would look at what's happening and he would agree with me. He would be like, oh yeah, it's a kooky little religion you've got going on here that has nothing to do with me. Like, the things that Adam Smith were saying, like the biggest one in my view is the invisible hand of the free market. Like, in this society, saying the invisible hand of the free market is akin to saying God will decide. The invisible hand of the free market will come through and make everything better for everyone. Well, the only time Adam Smith referenced the invisible hand of the market was for the exact opposite purpose. That he said that if we unleashed these capitalist forces on our society, it would be as though an invisible hand came through and destroyed us. So we live in a kooky little religion that uses economics as a shield and pretends as though it's a science when it's a weird little religious language to defend this trifecta. The trifecta of the worship of money, the worship of self, and the worship of ignorance. And that's why our society is destroying itself. Because we refuse to acknowledge that maybe we should make decisions based on facts, on things that are real. I hope you don't lose your TikTok channel. You have great oratory skills. I really vibe with your vicious barbs towards the U.S. ruling class. Yeah, thank you, French. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. One of the things I pride myself on, and I'd like to say this because you said that you were a libertarian yourself. I pride myself on not being a fundamentalist. Like, there are people in the chat who describe themselves as anarchists, and there are people in the chat who say they don't really know who they are. And so I'm happy to let many different voices speak as long as they do so respectfully. Yeah, I'd say that's right, Tinker. I think that communism and socialism can adapt to modernity and technology. Well, and also it sort of raises an interesting question of like, is this technology good or necessary? Like, we tend to just believe that technology is good. Now, oh, we made it, so it's good. It's like, yeah, is it? Is it? Should we not actually sit back and be like a little bit more skeptical about this shit? Like, Neuralink. This whole like, yeah, let's make a chip and put it in our brains. Is that a good idea, do you think? Do you think that's smart? I don't think so. I'm not convinced. Right? And frankly, a lot of this stuff, like, now we're all loaded with microplastics. Sperm count's been cut in half across the board. We're all clearly getting poisoned. Cancer rates are up. Is this technology good, do you think? Do you think it's good that we've done what we've done? Like, do you think maybe there could be some kind of counter argument that has some kind of legitimacy to it? Jade says, feels like the Taliban. What's happening in Iran sounds much worse in society affected by democracy. Is it a warning? I don't think I understand your comment. Like, what's happening in Iran is very special to what's going on in Iran. That Iran moved to being a far-right theocracy because of the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. And the people of Iran knew that they needed to allow a power structure in power that was highly militant and virulently defending Iran's culture. Well, that's the theocrat. That's the far right. Is it theocrats? Is that the word I'm looking for? Theocracy, theocrats? Yes, theocrats. That's the theocrats. Like, no matter what you think, right? Even if you're going like, fuck the theocrats. Well, if you've got the Americans knocking on your door saying, hey, we've got bombs and we're here to kill you, just like we killed the 1 million people in Iraq, just like we literally sending CIA death squads all over Afghanistan, you're going to go, yeah, can the well-trained military people who like to fight in the name of God do so? Yeah, sounds good. Fantastic. Thank goodness we have these highly militant defenders of our culture who are highly motivated to kill Americans on our side, right? But now America has pulled out of Afghanistan. Iraq is basically collapsed and is more tied up in what's going on with Syria than what's going on with Iran. And the politics of that region are just chaos generally. But it looks as though, like, from the Iranian position, they're like, okay, that border seems secured. The Americans are gone from here. So do we need these theocrats anymore? No, let's get rid of the theocrats. And it looks like the populace of Iran is basically saying, like, yeah, let's get rid of the theocrats. The trouble, of course, being that the theocrats are like, no, we like being in charge, right? And so the Iranians are trying to get rid of their own theocrats, even though the theocrats were pretty important, if you ask me. Like, maybe their Iranians have a different perspective, and their perspective should be taken seriously. But my perspective, very clearly, Iran didn't fall, right? Like it or not, like, Iran didn't fall. The Americans wanted it to. They would have loved to get in there and blown up Iran. Didn't happen. They must have done something right. Would the banks need to be dissolved? I mean, this system of financialization will dissolve itself. I think that's something that people don't really understand. That the Americans, like, yeah, the American banking system is largely fictitious. It's mainly fictitious capital, and it will simply dissolve itself. Like, that's this major crisis that I'm talking about. There's a major crisis, a major financial crisis that's coming our way, and it is based entirely on the fact that money isn't real. It isn't even tied to an actual physical object anymore, and because of this, it will dissolve itself. People will simply go, oh, this doesn't actually do anything for us anymore. And that's really going to catch a lot of people off guard. Like, people are not going to know what to do about it. Like, that's how desperate it's going to be. Like, for real. Like, you're not going to be able to buy a loaf of bread with a day's pay, because the money's just not going to be worth anything. And also, like, yeah, if your banks are publicly owned and all that. So that's a much bigger conversation than what I just talked about there, but we're getting late in the day and I'm a bit tired. Western civilization, try not to misinterpret its own text challenge. Impossible. No God's hand, the aggregate decisions of voluntary actors. Have you read von Mises' Human Action, the most credible description of wealth creation? I have not read von Mises' Human Action. I mean, to me, the most credible description of wealth creation is just, like, people go pull up resources from the earth. Those resources get worked on, and that's how wealth's created. Like, that's... I don't think there's a big mystery to it. Like, Marx talked about it. Engels talked about it. I'm sure this von Mises fellow talked about it. It really is just like people do stuff. I think we were better off without smartphones. Ilana Tusk has tortured and massacred hundreds of animals for testing Neuralink, and it's still a piece of garbage. It doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, industry moved way faster than prudence, and we are being poisoned. That's absolutely true. Without technology, how would I have gotten my vasectomy? Look, no one's arguing against the idea of technology. What we're saying is, like, maybe we should like actually ask ourselves, like, what is this going to do? Like, is it good that we're making these like big, enormous, especially the things that are socially disruptive? Like, is it good that we're making these socially disruptive technologies and then just dropping them on the populace and then walking away? Like, we're not talking about your vasectomy. Like, we're talking about enormous social manipulative systems that are disruptive. Like, something my dad talks to me a lot about this particular point is he laments the loss of the telephone book. That he said, like, we used to have a telephone book, and if you that guy, you piece of shit, got me. But still, I'm going to follow through on this point because I think it's good. We used to have a telephone book. And if you wanted to organize your local populace, your local people, you could just phone people. And it was easy, right? Like, your local church could just be like, oh, telephone book, boop, 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 boop. Hi, it's your local church. We're doing a thing. Hope you can come. Click. Right? Well, that's all gone. How do you organize anything? If you ask me, a big reason why we are so disorganized as a people is because all of these apps and all of these things are designed to keep us away from our neighbor. And if you want to organize locally, you got to make a flyer, basically, is what you can do. But that's not really great. That's not the best way to do it. Like, it really did used to be just like boop, 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 boop. Oh, hey, hi, I'm from this organization. Can you blah, blah. But now, like, I don't pick up my phone. I never pick up my phone, ever, under any circumstances. Like, if you phone my phone, even if I know who you are, I'm not picking that thing up. Like, no, thank you. Like, no, thank you. That's not gonna happen. Send me a text. Send me an email. That's how it's gonna work. But like, it's just so clear to me that like a lot of the technology we have has disorganized the populace as a default. Just we're so detached from each other. Fractional reserve banking is a product of. Oh well, I mean, fractional reserve banking is just like a shell game, right? Like that's the big reason why it's not based on anything. It's just literally like money out of the air. And the real thing that's going to collapse the American market in big ways is that other major economies are getting off the dollar. That's the end of it. That Lula in Brazil is putting together a South American currency. China and Russia are putting together a renminbi, a Southeast Asian currency. Saudi Arabia is trading oil off the dollar in yuan now. And all of this is going to devalue the dollar in a massive, 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 massive way. Like a massive way. Because the entire rest of the world is going to start trading off the dollar and is essentially going to turn and look at America and the West generally and say, what is it you do? Like, what is it you actually create and make? Nothing? Oh. And the dollar is just going to go... Like, it's a catastrophe that's looming right in front of us. And we're not doing anything about it. Yeah, the loss of community, I honestly think it's led to mass shootings. I easily convinced, yeah. Christopher De Silva, good to see you, bud. Hey, John, just got on. Have you talked about the recent flurry of attacks on the TTC? I haven't really, because I'm a lot of it, I'm waiting for the article. That's really what I'm waiting for, Christopher. Like, it's impossible to deny that there hasn't been a flurry of attacks on the TTC, but like, what is it? Where is it coming from? Who are these people? And I don't know enough about it, but, and also like, it's the same reason why I don't report on every mass shooting that happens, you know, because it's all I would do. Like, the society is in decay. The society is in decay. Like we're decaying in a serious and significant way. And in my view, it's not that difficult to figure out. Oh, we've abandoned huge segments of the population. Inflation is skyrocketing. People can't get food. People can't get goods anymore. Yeah, give me your money. Like I don't think it's a mystery. Like that's really what it is. Like and the rich will act as though it is a mystery, and they'll constantly say things like, oh, mental illness, and the performative liberals will be like, oh, it's mental illness and drug use and all that kind of stuff. So that we've got to focus on mental health and drug issues and not focus on the fact that people are hungry. Hungry people do desperate shit. It's really not a mystery. You got to be highly educated and extremely wealthy to be this dumb. To really, really miss what is evident and obvious to anyone else, which is, yeah, if you don't eat for a day, like, you ever been hangry? Right? You ever been hangry? Everyone's had that, right? Where they've just been so hungry it made them angry and then they said something stupid, right? Well, just imagine that didn't stop. Right? Imagine that you were hangry and there wasn't like food at the other side. Imagine that you were hangry and your bank account was at 0. Like, give me your money. It's pretty straightforward to me, and honestly pretty understandable. Like I'm not sitting here being like the people who are doing these attacks on the TTC, they gotta be round up and we gotta raise the police budget and gotta do the what we should do is give money to the poor. That's what we should do. That we should go to John Tory's house, take his stuff, sell it, and give it to those people so that they can get some food. That's what we should be doing. We should go to Doug Ford's house, take his stuff, sell it, and give that money to the poor. Like, we should take away the houses from the people who have 3 houses, as little as 3. We should take those houses away and give them to people without houses. Like, we have to stop pretending like the solutions are not easy. They are easy. They are simply inconvenient to a small group of psychopaths. That is all that is happening in this society. Take empty houses. Give them to people without houses. Take excess wealth from losers who do no work, like Doug Ford, and give it to hungry people. These are easy, straightforward, very, very, very understandable solutions that you have to go to a university and get a PhD to think are wrong. Like, it's only the most indoctrinated or most sociopathic people in the society who disagree with this. It's extremely simple. Yeah, if the government wanted to house the poor, they'd build houses. That's not what they want. But no, and to me, it's even worse than this, French. Like, it's even worse. They don't need to build the houses. For every homeless person, there are 5 empty houses. We have the houses. We just need to put the people in them. Like, it really is that, like, that is how degenerate we are. That's how bad it's gotten. That it isn't like an oopsie, we don't have enough houses, oh dear. It's literally like, there's an empty house sitting right there with a homeless person sleeping outside of it. And we just can't put 2 and 2 together on this. We literally cannot seem to withstand the idea as a people that we take that person and move them 10 feet so that instead of being outside, they are inside. That's how pathetic it is. like ruthlessly pathetic. And it all flows in to that trifecta. They didn't pay for it. They got to buck up. And I'm too stupid to realize that this is bad. You know, politicians do something bad, spin it like they did good, as if we're all a bunch of morons. I mean, Jade, you've seen the populists, right? There are still people voting conservative. Like, they wouldn't do it if it didn't work, I think is what I'm trying to say. I don't get why more people aren't mad. I think that there are a lot of people who want to believe that we're going to pull it up. Like, this is one of the things that I constantly say. Because I get people in here who actually ask, like, how do you convince people, John? Like, how do you convince people that the system is decaying or something? Because maybe they've got an uncle or something, right? They've got someone in their life that they're trying to convince. And I always say to them, like, don't. You don't need to convince anybody of anything. And capitalism is going to convince them more than anything. That things are going to begin to get extremely obvious extremely fast. So obvious that to stand up and pretend as though it isn't happening means that you are a Nazi. Like a Nazi, like a neo-Nazi, like literally swastika on your forehead Nazi. That's how obvious it's going to get. That no one in the conversation, from the far left to the far right, is saying that what is happening in the housing market is fine. No one. There isn't a single voice. Because everybody sees it and goes, yeah, come on. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And now take all of that and put it onto food. And now, oh, by the way, 1 million people are unemployed now. Just, you know, we raised this rate by 15 percentage points or however many percentage points. And oopsie-doo, now 1 million people are unemployed. Like, all of the arguments of individualism are going to die in front of your face. They're going to die. Because it's going to be obvious. Like, there's going to be mass layoffs. The layoffs are already starting to happen. There's going to be major, enormous corporations, huge corporations, that are going to shut their doors. Like, imagine if Walmart announced, yeah, we're closing our doors. Well, how quick does the ethos of individualism die? And how repugnant would you have to be to say to the homeless people that would create, well, that's a you problem, you gotta buck up. So you're a fucking Nazi then. Like, and no more of this bullshit where it's like, oh, everything you dislike is Nazism. No. Everything that's Nazism is Nazism. And watching people die in the streets outside of empty apartments seems like something Nazis would do. But we're a white supremacist fascist society. I mean, fascism is extremely popular. Probably the most popular ideology in Canada, certainly. The owners good to see you, Rusty. The owners increased their wealth by trillions of dollars during COVID. I'm sure the trickle down will happen any moment now. Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, Doug Ford saying Ontario healthcare is only similar to North Korea and Cuba, but because communism bad. Yeah. No, and like, once the collapses begin, it's going to be like a domino effect. Like, one collapse will lead into another collapse, which will lead into another collapse, and it'll just be like, and the response to the collapses by the psychopath class will be mass extraction. that they will extract as much wealth as they can before they go to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Like, that is their strategy. That is actually literally what they are doing. And when it happens, we are going to see huge segments of the populace get completely blindsided by it. Because I think a common thing you'll hear is, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was this bad. I think that's going to become the common phrase that you'll hear, like your grandma or your uncle. You know, oh, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. It'll be that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, of course Israel's bombing Gaza again. Do they ever really stop? Do they ever really stop, Andre? And if history is any indication, there's going to be a spiking inflation. Like, pre-World War II in Germany, there was a spiking inflation that was so bad that German workers demanded their pay at the beginning of the day, because if they waited until the end, so that they could go buy goods with it, because if they waited until the end of the day, the money would be valueless. People literally bringing like barrels of money to get bread. I don't think people fully understand how serious it's going to be, because of the devaluation of the dollar, because of the inability of the ruling class to think rationally, or to even care to think rationally. I think that's the other big thing. It's the worship of ignorance, right? The worship of ignorance. That the stupider you are, the better you are. And that somebody who stands up and says, here's the facts and the evidence and all that kind of stuff, well, those people should be roundly ignored. Like literally, there are politicians. I talk to people in the basic income movement. I've talked to people who have said, like, yeah, I have shown people like hard mathematical evidence of what we're talking about. And then they'll turn around and say, yeah, but I had a conversation with my cabbie. Like, this is what's happening in today's society. It's a worship, an absolute just bend down and kiss the feet and praise of ignorance. And the stupider you are, the better you do. Yeah, Israel is exhausting. I mean, the American empire is exhausting. Like, it's just exhausting. By definition, that's what it does. That's the whole point. Is that it's supposed to exhaust you. Like, one of the things I've started to think about, like, you know, you get the just get a better job crowd. And I think to myself, dude, if I had a job that was more stressful than the job I have now, I literally could not do this. Like, literally couldn't do it. Because, like, this takes energy. It takes energy to talk about these things. It takes energy to say, like, hey, have you noticed? Like, have you noticed that the society is in a free fall collapse and it's not going to get better? Because nobody wants it to get better. Like, nobody's trying to make it better. And all of the solutions that we're being presented with are literally grifts. That's something that the Trudeau government taught me. That I had heard of this concept previously, but the Trudeau government really displayed it in a brilliant and perfect way. That one of the great ways to distract people from an issue, climate change is the big one that the liberals do it on, is to acknowledge the reality of the problem, say that we're on your side and that we're going to do something about it, and then do something about it that doesn't work at all. That is the strategy of the grifters, which is the psychopath class generally. What's going to happen to Israel is actually going to be really brutal. Like, it's going to be really, 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 really brutal. Because the collapse of the currency, right, the collapse of the American economy, is also going to bring with it a retraction of the empire. Like, the empire is not going to be able to afford administrative power. It's not going to be able to afford troops. It's not going to be able to afford administrators anymore. It's not going to be able to pay anybody anything because the currency has collapsed and the value of the dollar has collapsed. And so the people who are overseas administrating the empire are suddenly not going to have, they're not going to be getting paid, right? They're just not going to be getting paid. Certainly not in a currency that's going to get them anything of value. And so the empire is going to retract, and it's going to stop. It's not going to be able to exert itself any longer. And I think that's the thing that people don't really anticipate or really think about. Is it's not able to exert itself anymore. It won't be able to send missiles. It won't be able to send troops any longer, because it simply is dealing with an internal crisis that is so huge and overwhelming that it needs all of its resources to deal with it. Because, like, an economic crisis on the scale that we're talking about, like mass rioting, mass looting, like you're talking about like Walmarts being burned down, like quite serious shit. It's very unlikely that order will be maintained. It's why they're militarizing the police. Like, the ruling class know it's coming. They understand that it's coming. And so they've militarized the police. If the American police were a military unto itself, if they were considered a military, they would be the third largest military in the world, or third most funded military in the world. That it's the American military, the Chinese military, the American police. And all of it's going to collapse. Like, all of it's going to collapse. And all we'll have is cops. Right? Like, all we'll have is cops and military people. Because it's all we've done. And once the empire retracts, and it's going to happen fast, then Israel is going to be left to itself. And it's going to look out into a world that it's created for itself, and it's going to see that it has no allies. And it has only enemies. And I suspect that within a year or two, Israel will be attacked. Like, the Muslim Brotherhood is very explicit about its intentions for Israel. Like, Saudi Arabia is not going to protect Israel. Iran is not going to protect Israel. Like, and even scarier than all of that, one thinks to themselves, well, Israel has nukes. Well, the people who are going to attack Israel live in caves. They don't give a fuck. They don't care. What's Israel going to do? Oh, Israel's going to nuke them. Oh, okay. Then I get to go to a land where there's 700 virgins or something and die in this great fire and this great conflagration. Okay, that's part of the deal. And if you don't think those people exist, you're absolutely fucking fooling yourself. Like, you're absolutely fucking fooling yourself. That the people who are going to attack Israel in order to destroy it are doing so because they think they are the arm of God himself. I think it's way past that, Tinker. I think that's over. Like, I don't think that even if Israel started to talk that game, that it would, like, if the Americans are out of the equation, Israel will be wiped out. Like, no one's going to come to save it. No one's going to come to protect it. No one's going to try. Like, who's going to? Russia? Is Russia going to send a lot of aid to Israel? China? See China sending a lot of aid to Israel? Right? Getting involved in that quagmire? You see, the Americans literally won't be able to. Like, who's rushing to save Israel? So, and the people who are going to attack Israel, they are not going to be deterred by nuclear bombardment. I think this is right, Tinker, what you just said. Half of Israelis will leave. Yeah, I think that's right. A mass displacement, refugee crisis, right? And I also suspect that it will be used as a recruitment tool by neo-Nazis throughout America to whip up Christian fascists against Muslims, because that's who's gonna do it for sure. Yep. No, there will be people who will fight, of course. There'll be people who will fight, but it's just, yeah. And when they lose, they'll frame it as another Holocaust. Yeah, that's right. Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. For sure. And in the West, it'll be considered that way, and people will talk about it that way, even though it's completely of the West's doing. Like, America has completely done this to itself. Like, or has done it to Israel. And Israel has completely done it to themselves. You should listen to Norm Finkelstein if you want to hear more about this. That, like, the forces that exist throughout the Middle East, like, it's basic numbers. Like, what have I always said about the Ukraine thing, right? Like, it's just basic numbers. Russia puts 300,000 troops on the ground. NATO puts 0. Like, that doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Who's going to win, right? Well, Israel is a small little country, doesn't have a big population. What is the population of Israel? Not even 10 million. Small little country, right? Less than Greece, right? Not to mention the 5 million Palestinians that exist there. So you literally have 10 million Israelis, 5 million. Like, it's a pretty basic numbers game. It's a pretty basic numbers game. That the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, all of these terrorist organizations, like, all of them are basically like, fuck Israel. There's no organization in that region that is like, yeah, Israel's cool. What a cool, chill place. And it is just going to come down to basic numbers. Cool. Like, I don't think they win. Like, I don't think they win. Okay. They've been defeating the Americans, but okay. Like, at the very least, then, At the very, very least, then, it'll be a war. At the very, very least. Like, the people of the Middle East are not going to just look at Israel and be like, oh yeah, okay, you're cool. It's not going to happen that way. Yeah, it's just straight up not going to happen that way. Like, there's not going to be like a cooler heads will prevail and, oh, Israel's coming to the diplomatic table. Like, that's none of that's going to happen. Yeah, but that's only because the Americans are there. That's only because the Americans are there. Right? And like the Americans are acting as this like dam. Well, the dam's going to break. And all of these groups are going to ally themselves on one single principle. Because all of them agree. Like all of them agree. Like they're not gonna like these guys. Yeah. Anyway, what a way to end the night. I'm at the end of it. I have to pee. I'm hungry. I'm gonna go do all of those things. Always remember, guys. Each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.